There it is.
Jeez, YouTube. All right. It's like I had amnesia or something. It took like minutes just for that button to pop up. So now we're live on YouTube. Good to go. We're going to start yapping because we got a lot to go through. So these calls happen. It's not live?
No, it's live.
We're
good.
Okay, good.
We're good. We're
cool.
live.
So if you're new here, welcome. Glad to have you. This call right here, this open office hours call, happens once per month. And then 2 weeks from now, so always 2 weeks separated, we have an expert session. And we have someone special in our crew. She's actually a PodHacker member, an OG, when it wasn't even called PodHacker. Lisa Beyer is joining us next time, and she's a PR master. She's been in the game for 20 plus years. So, not just someone that picked up, figure out how to get some wins on Haro or do some press releases. Like she's been in the game for a long time. So Lisa she was actually a member of Podcast Accelerator when it was actually our first version of PodHacker. And since launching her shows, with our guidance, I think she launched 2 shows. She's up to like over 140 episodes now.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
She's going crazy. So she'll be August 10th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So mark your calendar, August 10th, 10 a.m. That's when we're going to do our next live session for PodHackers. And that will be with Lisa Beyer, our go-to PR expert. But what some of the other stuff we've been talking to with Lisa has been stuff like building full-on media platforms, not just podcasts, and like some of the future trends. You were talking to her yesterday about like VR and maybe
metaverse.
What some of the implications on podcasting are with some of the newer advances in PR. So we'll be talking to her about some of that kind of stuff. It's some exciting stuff that I haven't quite gone down the rabbit hole yet, but
she's on the edge of the trends and like what's coming up next. So it's really cool to have her kind of, she's just a trusted friend, and we're bringing her on here to kind of share more of that with you, because usually it's just phone calls. She's giving us all these cool insights. We're like, hold on, we got to share this.
Yeah.
And she also has a cool PR training that she's finally put out there and made it accessible to everybody. So that's our expert coming up next month. And like you said, August 10th. So we'll make sure you're checking out our emails. If you don't see our emails, make sure you are, because we always update you prior to these calls. The Facebook group, we're always posting in there as well, and anything cool coming up. So expert sessions, those are actually and as are these open office hours, customers only of PodHacker. We do stream this on YouTube as well. We have a new YouTube channel. We kind of reresurrected it.
So we'll probably get into this in a little bit when we talk more about like YouTube and what we've been doing. But we've got a PodHacker YouTube channel and a Hustle and Flowchart YouTube channel. So we're kind of separating the things a little bit. So those of you that are interested in learning podcast strategies, being on these live tuning into these live podcast sessions, we're going to start doing a lot more sort of tactical strategies and tips on the PodHacker YouTube channel. And then Hustle and Flowchart is going to be a lot of the interviews and interview clips and some of that kind of stuff. So kind of separating that content into purely PodHacker content and purely Hustle and Flowchart content. So make sure if you're not subscribed to the PodHacker YouTube channel, you subscribe to that one. This is actually the first video that's going live on that one, but it's the first of many. Obviously, all of these live streams will go on there from here on out. And then, like Joe said, the expert sessions where we bring on people like Lisa Beyer. And last month it was Joe Kearns, our email automation expert. The month before it was Gert Malik, our SEO expert. The month before it was Kurt Molly.
You missed Molly.
Oh, we had Molly Mahoney last month.
Yes,
Molly Mahoney. The month before was Joe Kearns. The month before that was Gert. The month before that was Kurt Molly on Facebook ads. So we do these really cool expert sessions every month where we bring on an expert in their field. They may not be podcasters, right? So we had Molly, she's into live streaming and organic social media. We had Kurt Molly, who's a Facebook ad guy. We had Gert, who's an SEO person. All of these people, we bring them in and we say, given your expertise, you're a Facebook ads expert. What advice would you give a podcaster? How would you use Facebook ads to grow a podcast? Gert, given that you're an SEO expert, what would you do to grow a podcast as an SEO expert? So we bring these experts in, and next month we're bringing Lisa Beyer in, and we're going to say, Lisa, as a PR professional, as a PR expert, what would you do in the PR world to get more listens on a podcast? So that's what we do on those expert sessions. Those are for PodHacker customers only. So we do not live stream those. Those are only purely for the PodHacker members, PodHacker customers. But these podcast lives that we also do once a month, you have to be in the Zoom room to ask us questions. You have to be a podcast customer in the Zoom room to ask us questions, but it is free to watch over on YouTube as well for non-PodHacker customers. So that's kind of how it works for all the the noobs in the group.
The noobs.
Yeah.
Hey. Do they like to be described as noobs, Matt? Does anybody?
I bet they're indifferent.
Oh, yeah, that's probably true. And what's the other note? I was going to say something. Oh, questions. If you have any questions, if you want feedback, that's what the point of these calls are. We have a bunch of podcast news, a bunch of yes, Michael.
It's okay because I called him. I spelled it NOOB, so it's different.
Different type of noob. Huh?
Yeah.
All right, just clarifying.
Yeah,
good. Figure that out. So make sure to have all your questions. If you've been going through the course, hopefully PodHacker, definitely anything that you might be getting snags on, throw it in the chat. We'll bring you on here. Even if you want us to look through something, if you want some feedback on what you're working on, this is your chance to get our feedback, but also just kind of toss it out there. Yeah. That's what I was thinking too. The internet cafe days.
Yes.
I like those, man. Oh, those are good times. We got to bring those back.
Yeah. All I ever did was play Counter-Strike.
Well, yeah. StarCraft, Counter-Strike.
I was only Counter-Strike.
That's true. StarCraft. I don't know. Counter-Strike was better in like kind of that environment, I guess. Yeah. Internet cafes.
That's all I ever remember playing in internet cafes.
I did it too. It was good times. Counter-Strike 1.5. I forget the number, man. Good times. What else we got? The agenda floated away.
Sorry. I wanted to look at my face instead.
You did.
No, I actually wanted to look at the chat. So maybe I'll move it over here so we can see the chat and our agenda.
We have this screen like right below the camera, and we conveniently covered ourselves up because
we don't want to look at ourselves.
It's just confusing. So we have some new training in there. What you're going to notice from us more so, because we're finally getting this kind of machine working, is in PodHacker. Primarily that training's from us, but like you were saying, all of our expert sessions that we've had. So that every 4 weeks we'll do an expert session. All those recordings are inside the training as well. Mm-hmm. But we just got some new training from Luis Diaz. He's a friend, another podcast growth expert. We've had him on our podcast before. So we just added, it's already in there, right?
No.
Oh, it will be in there.
It will be in there
soon. So you're going to learn all about how he's basically automating how to get more guests into his podcast, but also how to turn those guests into promoters of whatever he's got, like an affiliate partner. He's got a really cool system. It's actually lit up our brains to kind of create a new system in our own business where it can help kind of just push everything we're doing. And we're leveraging the relationships that we already have with our podcast. We're creating nice win-wins along the way. So Luis Diaz is one of the newer experts that we're going to be bringing in. Probably he'll be like a one-off here and there, but definitely check it out once we post it. I'm sure we'll send an email or something like that posted to the group.
Yeah. But, I imagine it'll probably be in there today. We were, Lewis recorded this training, and inside the training, he referenced some various documents and stuff. And I was waiting for him to send over the documents. We've got them now. So it'll probably be in the members area today. But kind of the bigger point here is that we do the live expert sessions once a month where we're live with the guest, picking their brain on their area of expertise. And then you guys could be on the call and ask their questions as well. But we're also starting to add in sessions from other experts that are pre-recorded. They're not these live streams. We have other PodHacker or podcaster friends. We're so used to using the word PodHacker now.
And PodHacker friends.
Yeah, we have some PodHacker/podcaster friends who are doing really, really cool stuff with podcasts. So we're essentially just asking them to contribute training if it doesn't make sense for them to come on live.
For sure. So you're going to see more of other folks. We want different perspectives. We've been saying this kind of as like the vision when we launched PodHacker a few months ago originally, but we're the foundation. It's walking through kind of our perspective, the systems, how we've done things, but we want to get other people's perspectives too. There's a whole bunch of different ways to grow podcasts, monetize, create a podcast. So expect more of that from us outside of the expert sessions, and actually just, seeing new content throughout, get tossed into PodHacker all the time. So keep a lookout.
And if you're not a PodHacker member, if you're watching this over on YouTube and you're going, hey, I really want to be a PodHacker member, just go to podhacker.com and you can sign up and become a PodHacker member.
It's easy. And if you don't want to jump in, or if you don't feel you're like quite ready and you like what you're seeing here, check out PodHacker News.
Yes, PodHacker News is our free newsletter. We send it out every single Monday, and that's where we round up all the news that we're kind of paying attention to in the podcast world. All the stuff that you should pay attention to. There's a lot of podcast resources out there, a lot of podcast newsletters out there. one of our favorite podcast newsletters, emails every single day. And every single day, there's like 17 links in the email, right? So
it's a lot to digest.
And that's just one of the lists we're on. We're on like 4 lists that are like that. So
it's a lot of information out there, but we don't want to do that to you. We're not trying to overwhelm you here.
Yeah. So the PodHacker News, it comes out just one day a week on Mondays. And in that Monday email, we're distilling it down to like the 7 most interesting things.
7-ish, yeah,
something like that.
So you're going to get a mix of like
some weeks more, some weeks less.
Yeah, you're getting the headlines, but you're also, because you want to be aware of like, some of these big acquisitions, for instance, like there's hundreds of millions of dollars getting tossed around, not to just one specific person. I mean, Joe Rogan, maybe he got the key, the most of it so far. But I mean, there's been a lot of cool deals happening that you should be aware of, even if you don't feel like, oh, I'm never going to be the next Joe Rogan. Well, you know what? There's some trends that we're seeing shape up now. And we've been talking a lot about these. That's what you'll see in the news later. Yeah.
Joe likes to make fun of me for saying this a lot, but I'm going to say it again.
Oh.
We like to be where the puck is going.
Are you going to play some hockey?
Yes, we like to go where the puck is going. And if you're a podcaster, you should also probably pay attention to where the puck is going. So get on PodHacker News. It's a free Monday weekly email. Just go to podhacker.com/news and you can sign up there. It's free.
It is very free and very awesome.
Yes. And that is the end of our housekeeping section of this call.
All right. So looking at the chats, thanks for everybody joining us live. Tano, great to have you back here. And why we're told we don't have any disk space on our computer right now. Oh, ScreenFlow is running. Did we know that?
I didn't know ScreenFlow was running.
Hopefully that wasn't an important recording, but it's 7 hours and 36 minutes long. Wow,
That's interesting. This is from like yesterday or something. This must be from even before yesterday.
7 hours ago. I don't know. So
what did we record?
More technical detail.
Nobody was even in the office 7 hours ago. How did this even record? I don't get it.
So someone broke into our office last night, I'm assuming, and hit record on ScreenFlow and wanted to take up all of our disk space. So I think that's just.
Well, as long as we're still live streaming, we're all right.
Yeah. Not going to touch anything.
Let's not mess with anything.
What up, Tano? Yeah. Sorry, distracted by error messages on the computer here. Saw some questions actually already. Thomas Mangum out the gate.
Yeah. So here's what we're going to do. So I'll sort of break down the agenda, and but as questions come through, we do like to answer the questions. The whole point of these PodHacker Lives, PodHacker office hours is to answer your questions live. So if you're going through the PodHacker training, we want to be able to answer any questions you have. If you have any news or insights or anything cool you want to share, we want to be able to talk to PodHacker customers. So the way we conduct these trainings is we do have an agenda of things we want to talk about, but the most important thing is that we're answering your questions. So we're going to kind of work through our agenda, but as we see questions pop in, we'll probably divert over to the questions, answer them for a few minutes, talk about whatever's coming in on the questions, then jump back to our agenda. So our agenda is we're going to talk about housekeeping, which already did, check. We're going to talk about what's new with us, what we've been working on, what we've kind of seen working for our podcast, things like that. Then we're going to get into podcast news. We're going to talk about all the industry news that we're currently paying attention to. And then we're going to share some cool resources from around the web that we found that are, other people kind of sharing growth ideas or monetization ideas or industry statistics, things like that.
Cool trends to be aware of and take advantage of.
So that's the flow. Now let's answer some of these questions before we get into the what's new with us section.
For sure. So let's start off with Thomas Mangum, who is a buddy of ours from years and years ago.
He lives in San Diego, and we haven't seen himself in a couple of years. So
it's been a while.
Seen him in a couple of years. So we gotta.
He was doing podcasting, I think, before we really dove into it in a big way. So let me just I'll read this out for everybody on YouTube. So Thomas Mangum asked, he's a new member of PodHacker, 2 things. First thing is naming, digging into naming considerations a bit more. I.e. making the decision and moving on. So we could talk about naming from our perspective. Number 2, have we considered offering a studio service? Pros or cons? No, we have not, but maybe you have. And we could talk about it. And background, you've had 2 podcasts over the years, none currently, and always had a vision of a studio service versus setting up my own thing. Okay.
Yeah. So let's talk about the second one first, actually, because we have talked about setting up our own recording studio and letting people like rent it. Yeah. But we've never actually done it. I mean, there's a couple of reasons. Like, one is I just kind of feel weird with other people using our equipment. That's just weird.
I think we just didn't want others around the studio when we're not around.
I don't know. It just kind of weirds me out. Yeah. But the other thing is we kind of broke down a lot of the like logistical elements and how much it would cost and how much we would make off of it. It just didn't seem very worth our time, especially since we would be using the studio probably more than any one of our clients would. So we'd be using most of our time.
It's a cool idea. I mean, if you have a good location and someone who can kind of manage this as like an office hand or a studio, person to run it, manager. One of our previous offices, we probably could have pulled it off, but
we let a couple actually people use it as a video studio.
People in this office space that we're in,
we let them. We had a giant green screen and camera equipment and stuff and lighting and all that. So we did let a couple people use it as a studio. I think they paid us like $100 for the day to rent it out on a day that we weren't using it. My aunt was your aunt.
Yeah, it was like someone we could trust. So I mean, I think if it's someone off the street, like we just aren't geared for it. For one, we never have been, but. You could totally, there's been some really cool co-working spaces or even just random offices that we've definitely paid and have used their studio here and there, for whatever kind of shoot. So if you can pull it off and it makes sense financially and, just logistically for you being there or someone else, it's just not something that we wanted to go down in terms of systems and stuff.
Yeah. So as far as naming the podcast, at the end of the day, is not necessarily set in stone. So if you name your podcast and move on and change your mind later, you could rename your podcast, right? Like Pat Flynn's podcast with Smart Passive Income, and then he started referring it to SPI, and then I think he just rebranded it inside of iTunes as SPI.
Did he? No,
Entrepreneurs on Fire, John Lee Dumas. He kind of rebranded down to EO Fire and changed the name of that show.
Well, he had some legal stuff coming after him, right?
I think Entrepreneur Magazine might have come after him around it or something.
So he had to pivot in after he had a massive audience. Still seems like he's doing great.
Yeah. So I mean, when it comes to the names, if you're looking for like somebody to give you the go ahead to just like pick a name and move on, like go ahead and do it because you can change it later.
I wouldn't get hung up on that, Thomas. And knowing you, I know you think deeply about a lot of stuff, as rightly so, and that's probably a superpower of yours. I want to get hung up on it. Think about what you're trying to get across in this message. Like what is the thing? Like why are you starting another podcast? Because you've done it before. You know the game, and so think about like what do you embody and what's the mission or what's the purpose of this thing?
And if possible, try to get your main sort of niche keyword into the title. Like that's something that we'd probably do differently if we were rebranding our podcast at this point.
Can make things a little easier.
Sure. You'll definitely get more reach from like a search perspective if you actually have like your keyword inside of the name of the actual show. So if your show was all about, photography, you probably want to have something related to photography in the title so that when people search those keywords, ideally your show shows up. But Hustle and Flowchart doesn't really say who we are either. It just kind of we've stuck with it. So, if you have a name that you like, just roll with it. I don't know. It's hard because everybody's different. Every show's different. There's so many different considerations. But I would say the best advice is just kind of pick something, move on with it. And if you change your mind down the road, it's not that big of a deal to actually rebrand it.
I wouldn't worry about it too much. Cool. Let us know, Thomas, if that helped you out at all. If not, clarify a little bit and we can riff on that a little further. Let me see, just checking out the comments. Tano said,
I'm scrolling past some of the stuff. You recorded someone's
sleeping. Yeah. It seemed like, here, I don't know what was happening. What the hell? 8 hours ago, almost someone in this office, wanted to screw with us. All right. So Tano, you were saying you want to get back issues of the podcast newsletter. So you're talking the EGP letter. The pod news, my bad. So you want to get back issues of the pod news. That'd be a good idea.
Yeah, we don't have any sort of like archive of them.
Kind of like pod news, like the one that has just a ton they publish online. We've toyed with the idea of doing that.
Yeah.
I think we could do that with Active Campaign, right? Just link to a previous email.
Yeah, well, we'll dig in. We'll figure out a way to have like an archive of them. I think there might be some ways to do it that we've already got available to us. So
we can hook you up.
We'll dig into that. That's a good idea. The studio business is ridiculously hard business to make money in. It's much better to offer a full production service at a higher rate.
Makes sense.
That's good insight. Yeah,
and you're an expert at this. You've been doing a ton of this for a long time. So Thomas, if you're listening, Tano's got a lot of background in the studio stuff.
Yeah, so meaning include editing and distribution services, kind of like Barstool Sports, which is actually a company we've been paying a lot of attention to lately.
Yeah.
So regarding name, this is from Tano. I think he's offering some advice to Thomas here. So regarding name, Business Insider came after me on a bunch of my domains, even though I own them before they even used it. Don't ever use blank Business Insider, such as Music Business Insider or Podcast Business Insider.
Interesting.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Is it better to ask questions here or in Q&A? The chat works. The Q&A works. We'll see them both. We're kind of probably paying a little more attention to the chat, but we will see them if you post them into the Q&A.
Yeah. We'll
There's a couple over
we
here.
were missing the Q&As. Our bad.
Sweet. Thanks, Thomas. All right. So Michael says, I'm torn between two niches that I'm passionate about, not sure which one to go with: marketing and mental health.
Ooh.
I love marketing and I can get free stuff. And I also have a heart for mental health. What would you do to figure out which path to take?
That's fun, Michael, because we have the same passions or at least interests, and ways we want to get it out. It's kind of the makeup or the DNA of our show. I would say the evolution over the years, it's gotten a lot more into the implications of mental health and how that affects business, but also the marketing is so dang important. And I guess like we could talk about the way, like from our perspective, we started with marketing, still have marketing wrapped up in the DNA of our show. But at the same time, we realized going through personal experiences, having interesting people on tell about their personal experiences, and especially around the mental game. That's why you see recently we just been bringing a lot of experts in different ways to really optimize your mindset and just mental state in general, because we know now from experience, but also just so many other people coming on the show, that if that's disregarded, that's just a piece of the puzzle. It's a gaping hole. You need that as part of it. So I would say try to wrap both of it in there if you can, and maybe lean into one to maybe get some traction for the show. Whatever you feel like is kind of maybe more of the leading factor there.
Yeah. I think when it comes to podcasts like that, I think there's a lot of marketing podcasts out there, and there's a lot of, mental health, mindset, mental game kind of podcasts out there. And I think where podcasts tend to stand out is if you go, okay, this is a passion, let's just smash them together and talk about both of them. Like, let's talk about mental health for marketers, let's
put some context around it.
Yeah. And then you kind of create this platform where you could go down both avenues. Or if you want that sort of separation, you can always do like 2 episodes a month that are on marketing and 2 episodes a month that are on mental health, and sort of switch back and forth, because I think there's a lot of overlap in those. I think a lot of entrepreneurs and marketers and people that try to strive for their own business struggle with mental health a lot, which is why we've kind of pursued both topics on our podcast.
Yeah, no, that's a solid question. Yeah. Sounds like that helps. So yeah, I think when you blend those two, I think the trends are going that direction anyway. There's a lot more people seeing the merits of it who kind of have pushed off mindset talk or the mental game, which is like, that's the key component to it all. It's just almost like we have a Travis Sago, another guy that we would study from, chocolate covered broccoli. Basically, the chocolate might be the marketing and the tactics and stuff, and the broccoli is like, hey, here's the stuff that you really should know as well. So yeah, that could be maybe approach for you.
For sure. So Thomas said that when he was talking about a studio service, he was referring to full production and editing and all that, similar to Blog Talk Radio, a bit old and low tech. Cool. So he's moving on. All right. So yeah, I mean, Blog Talk Radio is interesting. I don't know a ton about Blog Talk Radio, but it does look like kind of an outdated site. I almost feel like sites like Anchor have kind of replaced it now.
I think Thomas, if I remember correctly, way back in the day, you were on that platform, Blog Talk Radio.
Yeah. So. You had Coffee Talk Radio.
Yeah,
I think I did that show with you a couple of times.
It's a good model, though. I mean, if that's the way that you want to go with things, for sure.
Michael, yeah, no problem. Glad that you got some insights out of that.
Yeah, nice.
All right, let's see, what does Lisa say over here?
Oh, I don't even know what happened, Tana. What happened to Simone Biles today? But I know she has a lot of mental health, stuff in her background. Interesting. I'll have to check into that.
I haven't been in the loop on that yet today. All right. So Lisa says, I'm a new member, just completed the getting started and some of the next section on setting up your website. Question: if you already have a website, what are your suggestions, pros and cons on adding your podcast to your existing site versus creating a dedicated podcast site? What should we consider to make this decision? All right. So we definitely have opinions on that.
This is very timely.
It is very, very timely because it's something we're actually going to talk about in this episode about branding. So maybe we just hold off because we are going to talk about branding in this episode.
We are going to go deep on this, Lisa. So maybe keep it there so we can kind of keep it on our forefront.
All right, so
But
Lisa,
we'll circle back probably halfway through or so. If you got to leave early, ping us and we'll answer a little sooner.
yeah, and then Lisa also said for our podcast there will be 3 of us on the recordings. 2 of us are on the same household and 1 in another state. How important is it to have a video of you talking versus just audio? If video is important, what are your thoughts on using GoToMeeting or Zoom? All right, so I think video is becoming more and more important. I think some podcasts can be just audio, and you can just do a video show. I think it's our preference to do both because I feel like video is where the puck is going.
I think it's where the puck's at.
Yeah, it's where
but it's more so where it's going to. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, there are a lot of podcasts that are kind of really audio only focused, right? Like Dak Shepard's podcast is purely audio. For the most part, Conan O'Brien's purely audio. He posts some clips on YouTube, but it's an audio podcast. So there's some like really big popular podcasts that really just focus on audio. But I'd say as a smaller podcaster, not a celebrity big name who, can put out a podcast and overnight get 100,000 downloads on it. Like, as these smaller podcasters, you want to hedge your bets and try to be in as many places as possible. Right. So that's why we put our podcast on all of the audio platforms, but we're also putting them on YouTube, and we clip out stuff for, Instagram reels and YouTube shorts and all of the places that we could put them. We're just trying to like give ourselves the best potential to get discovered across multiple media platforms. People might not find the audio version, but they might discover the YouTube version. So for us, it's just a reach factor. We get more reach if we have it in more places. Yeah. So I would say as a smaller podcaster, it's important to probably put a little bit of focus on video. Now, as far as GoToMeeting or Zoom, we've been doing ours on Zoom.
No. I think we have a straight up answer on that one.
Oh yeah.
Do not use GoToMeeting in all caps. And that's written by our content editor. And I would 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
So
and
Zoom
I would also
is slightly better.
Zoom is a little bit better. If you're focused on video though, Zoom sucks for video. So we're actually we're playing with a few different alternatives to Zoom for recording the video version. Because Zoom really, really compresses the video down. And then when you go to edit it, it's like kind of crappy quality. So that's, if you're not too worried about the video quality, Zoom would be fine. But, Riverside FM is one that you can look into that you can actually record in pretty high quality video. Squadcast is another one that we've played with in the past that's decent. When we used it, it didn't actually have video functionality. So we've never actually played with Squadcast video functionality. But they do have video recording now as well. We use Riverside for that kind of stuff every once in a while, and we're trying to get a workflow down that's a little bit better with Riverside. But I think video is a smart decision, but not required.
I would say you're also going to see in the news some of these things that are coming up here where video is a big part, where downloads aren't necessarily the whole thing, but there are other platforms like YouTube that are leveraging video, and that's just going to help you with the growth of your podcast. So yeah, if you do choose to use video, especially with 3 people, it could get kind of tricky too. So kind of think through what that workflow should or would look like and how you want to be presented as well, because that's a whole nother thing. You don't want to just slap up bad video if you do choose to use video on some of these platforms, because it's probably going to be a waste of time, to be honest, unless you really have like a killer topic or a person on there that's going to get a lot of attention. Which is kind of when we would use video back in the day. Now it's consistent for us because we have a rhythm and a pattern to it, systems to support it, an editor, and we're only optimizing that further. But I don't know, maybe get the wheels going first with the 3 of you, since it's kind of a new thing from the beginning.
Yeah. And then Tano said, check out Ecamm Live. We actually haven't used it a whole lot ourselves, but we've actually been on other podcasts where they were using Ecamm Live, and it was a pretty good experience. So
for sure,
that's another one that we'll probably actually play around with a little bit. The reason we prefer Riverside over Ecamm Live is if you use Riverside, it actually records the audio and video locally on both computers. So when we're interviewing somebody, it's going to record the video and audio on their computer and then send us the local recording from their computer. So if we have any lag issues or audio connection issues or anything like that, they're still recording on their end. So it should be perfect quality on both ends, and we'll get their version sent to us. Riverside does that. We've done a ton of digging on Ecamm, and we couldn't find any evidence that Ecamm did that as well.
If it did it, that would be probably the
winner. Yeah, that would kind of solve it for us, as if Ecamm did that. But Ecamm, from what I understand, only records on the side of the person pressing record.
And Tano's adding in here saying, look at Vimeo Enterprise, which I don't know much about, or StreamYard for the 1080 plus performance. And then Lisa, this little add on to your question here, it says you can create a video with the audio and your branding, or with talking heads. Are talking heads better since they seem more common?
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, think of engagement. People want to see people. You can like for the longest time with our podcast, we were on YouTube, but we were automating it with repurpose.io, which is a great tool. And this does not take anything away from Repurpose, but all we were doing was just putting our audio waveform on YouTube as a destination to put our podcast. It's not horrible. I mean, it got us views, and it wasn't like tons of views. So if you can automate it, I mean, that was an easy process, and we pushed it over there. We had a presence, but talking heads always going to be better. Just look at the editing, though. You still don't want to complicate stuff without a plan. So, but you'll see. Keep an eye out on what we're doing on our channel. hustleandflowchart.tv. Jacob on the team, he's actually on the call here. He's been heading up our videos, and we're constantly optimizing the way we present our talking head videos, because those can get boring if it's a long version of just like a split screen Zoom style. Mm-hmm. But what you'll see is we're adding in more B-roll, we're adding in sound effects, music, call out text, and we're not there yet, but we're getting so much closer, and it's way more engaging, and we're getting a lot more engagement on our videos as we look at the stats too. So You'll see more of that from us as well.
Sweet. And then Michael, last little thing, he said, you two drink beers. Would love to hang out with you guys in San Diego. He's near Palm Springs, and we seem fun to hang with. Yeah,
we are fun.
Don't let us fool you. No, we suck.
What? Wow.
Yeah, no, we're boring.
No, I'm fun. I don't know about that guy.
You can go have beers with him. I'm boring.
Yeah. But where you should hang out with beers is if you do come to San Diego. I know you're not that far away, but Traffic and Conversion in September. I think it's mid-September. They'll this big old event. I think it's like 10,000 people they're shooting for. Mm-hmm. We are holding a brewery event there. So yeah, Michael, you are going to it. Perfect. Go to Overtime. Well, it's going to be Tuesday night. We hold a beer event where we basically brewed the beer 2 weeks prior to, and then we hold a party at Overtime. We call it Overtime. It's at Mission Brewery during that event. So we'll make it happen, man. We got to put out some press around it. We haven't done any marketing for it yet.
Yeah. I was actually in Palm Springs about a month ago, and it actually hit its heat record while I was there. It got up to 123, which was the heat record for Palm Springs. So that was
way too damn hot. And then Tano, I think it was you before or above. Yeah. About Simone Biles on the chat here. That's kind of crazy, man. Yeah. That story, I was reading that. So basically anyone on the YouTube side of things, it looks like she hurt her ankle, and essentially some other details, but basically it came down to her mental health, not so much the ankle. So yeah, that's curious. I'm curious on what that is.
Sweet. Well, let's jump back over to our agenda for a minute here, and go ahead and continue to pop questions in, and we'll answer them as they show up. But so let's talk about some of the stuff that's been working now, and let's actually start right
where we
here.
Start. What is that?
So we're actually
this is for Lisa.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. So we're actually going through a complete rebrand of our website because we built the Hustle and Flowchart podcast and we put it over on evergreenprofits.com. And then we regretted that decision 4.5 years into the podcast.
We thought we would regret it, but we didn't know. Yeah. Because Hustle and Flowchart came after we started our main business, Evergreen Profits, and that was still is at evergreenprofits.com. But yeah, we didn't realize that Hustle and Flowchart would be the brand that kind of overtakes that. And rightly so, it should, because it's more of a brandable thing anyway, at least for the direction we're going. So, and this is to, answer your question, Lisa Lang, from earlier about, if you already have a website, what do you suggest? The pros and cons of basically adding it to the site or making something separate?
Yeah. So I honestly think there's two schools of thought here, right? I think if you're building your podcast as like your sort of like main content hub, like Hustle and Flowchart, that's like our main content. It's what people know us for. It's what people follow us for. We make our money off of sponsorships and affiliate marketing, leveraging the Hustle and Flowchart brand. So for us, it just makes sense that Hustle and Flowchart is like a standalone thing. Now, saying that, if you have like a business in a different like industry and you're going to use the podcast as like a marketing channel for this existing business, then maybe it does make sense to just kind of roll the podcast into the existing business, right? Like if I was working at a shutter company, and we decided to start a podcast about shutters, the most exciting podcast in the world about shutters. Right? Like, I don't think I would go and create a whole new website called like the Shutterman podcast. I would just put like, I would call it like the Shutters 101 podcast, and it would live on my business's website. So it's almost like
you would have started a shutter company back in the day.
Because I did start a shutter.
A podcast.
Yeah. Well, I actually had a shutter blog back in the day.
I remember that. So you thought it was fun enough.
I didn't think it was fun enough. I thought I could make money off of it.
Okay. Yeah. Lots of demand there. But yeah, point taken now is you're using that to fund the business itself. You're trying to bring awareness, become the expert.
Yeah. Well, if you have content floating around the internet and people discover that content and it's on your brand's website, it's on your business's website, well, then ideally they're going to kind of go down the rabbit hole and learn more about your business.
Yeah.
Where if like you separate the two and you have the Shutter Guy podcast, and then you have your actual like shutter company where you sell shutters, but they're disconnected, somebody might view this content or listen to this content over here and never make it over to your other site or even realize that this business exists.
Yeah.
So like if I was creating it for a marketing content strategy for another business, I would 100% probably just build it in the existing business's website.
Agreed. Yeah. And when we look at our podcast, I feel like we're a little different. So back to the schools of thought, you could be a very direct way of making a podcast to an offer. And just to your point, like if you're a consulting business or shutter company or whatever, yeah, you could totally be the expert. And then that could be your outlet for content and to educate and to get people to know, like, and trust you and bring you in. So they're buying more of your stuff. That's not really our method. Maybe in the very beginning, we were a little bit more that way because we were trying to bring awareness to, the trainings that we had. And we were doing all these, stuff in the traffic game.
We had an EGP letter back then still too.
Yeah.
That
we
predates
were
the podcast actually.
That's right. Yeah. So we were marketing digital and online products and courses. Whereas now we've pivoted into this thinking of more of a platform and a media website, which you'll see a lot more of the trends in the news are leaning that direction. And this is why we've over the years have been kind of shifting everything that way. And that's why the website now that we're getting created is hustleandflowchart.com. And it's going to be a complete rebrand that showcases more of our personalities, the people we've had on the podcast, the topics, and then also the different things that we are connected with. It doesn't necessarily need to be our own products or services, but we are partnered with tons of amazing people. We're curators more than the creators of content. I think that's a distinction. So thinking about your own podcast, maybe Thomas, this helps you, Lisa as well, but we see ourselves as the curators of, amazing people, novel topics and things to share with you, people, things that we're excited about. That's why this call is even existing here in PodHacker in general. So think about, do you want to be the curator more so, or do you want to be the creator? And then, they go to you as the expert. Rather, for us, we're more like, hey, let's just build a community around this brand and have us be the trusted curators that gathers, basically garners all the attention. And then from there, we can promote whatever it might be or run with sponsorships, advertising, and other ways to monetize the efforts that we have here. So Hustle and Flowchart, 4.5 years later, it's finally happening.
Yeah. So
.com.
So basically Evergreen Profits is this sort of umbrella business, right? Like it's what Hustle and Flowchart and PodHacker live under. It's our LLC is Evergreen Profits essentially.
Yeah.
Right. So basically evergreenprofits.com is just going to be that. It's going to be sort of the hub of our business. So what's going to happen in the future is you're going to go to evergreenprofits.com and it'll be like, here's our brand, right? Hustle and Flowchart, PodHacker, I'm not going to name some of the other brands because they're still
got a lot going on.
We got some stuff going on. But yeah, there'll be a few other brands listed on Evergreen Profits. So you could kind of see what the sort of umbrella company is, but it's just going to be sort of what do you call it? Just like a transitionary site where you come there and then you could probably find our other
It's a media
websites.
website.
Yeah.
It's if you think of like a media site, we don't want to just we want to feature others, not make it the Matt and Joe show. I mean, that's
not even going to be Evergreen Profits. That's not going to be a media site. That's just going to be like here's the brands.
My bad. I was getting to switch my mind. Yeah. Well, that actually goes back to Tano. You asked a good question here is, a few questions here. Why not use Evergreen Profits as the main name of the website or of the podcast back in the day?
Yeah.
And
well, it wasn't representative of what we wanted to talk about.
Yeah. And to be honest, it didn't have like the I guess, the personality built into the name. Like when we made that name, we came up with that name like almost 10 years ago. I don't know, 8
Rich
years ago,
Seffrin had
maybe.
strategic profits. We liked that sound, and we went, we want to make
Evergreen.
evergreen profits. Let's see if we can get the domain name evergreen profits. And then we actually had to like go back and forth to actually negotiate the domain name. And then we got it.
Yeah.
And then we actually didn't use it for a while.
It's still like the name.
Yeah.
It's a great name. I feel like the Hustle and Flowchart name, we got a lot of feedback from as being, that's a cool name. That's a fun name. Oh my God, that's your guys' personalities kind of embodied in a name.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's kind of like the spectrum of like how you go about things. And like you're hustling hard sometimes, but other times you're just kind of flowing through things, so I don't know. It felt like it had a cooler meaning to it and people liked it more. Evergreen Profits is almost like this kind of, I don't know, feels like a stuffy or some kind of not corporate, but it just wasn't really like what was lighting us up. I don't think that, money's never been the thing that drove us, and that thing would kind of pin us into that feeling of, gotta talk about profits. Gotta, Well,
when we actually created one of our podcasts, our first podcast was the Online Income Podcast. The second podcast we created together, we initially called it the Evergreen Profits Podcast, and went, but we're not really talking about like making money so much in it. We did talk a lot about mindset and the mental game of business. So we actually rebranded that one as Evergreen Wisdom for a while,
which I like that more. That's still a cool name. So we'll probably do something with that.
So we had the podcast Evergreen Wisdom, which was a play on words off the Evergreen Profits brand. But then that podcast kind of fizzled, and Hustle and Flowchart just made so much sense. Like it was like the hustle, the flowchart, the sort of duality of business of like, you gotta work hard, but then you can also systematize stuff and back yourself out of it. Like we also like the term flow, like getting into flow stage. We talk about flow a lot. Right. So there's just like so many things around that name that we liked. We looked at that name, and when it makes sense from like looking at it from so many different angles, there's different interpretations that all make sense. And so we really liked that brand. I think there's one regret we have. It's not just creating hustleandflowchart.com from day one and started podcast episode number 1 from that domain. But I don't think when we started Hustle and Flowchart, we really anticipated it being as big of a part of our business as it actually became. So I think that was why we didn't. We kind of went, we're making our money off our newsletter. We're making our money off affiliate marketing. We're making our money off of our traffic course. We've got a affiliate marketing course. We've got all of these courses. That's where our money's being made. So let's just make this like the Evergreen Profits podcast. We'll just call it Hustle and Flowchart, but it'll promote all these other things. But over time, the podcast became our thing. It became the thing that generated the revenue that people seem to know us for the most. It became sort of like the identity of our company more so than Evergreen Profits. And that's why we're kind of going, well, this is how people identify us now. People go like, hey, they're the Flow Bros, they're the Hustle and Flowchart guys. Like people refer to us like that. Like,
I like the flexibility of having a name like this that's separate from the company as a whole. I mean, you look at guys like Roland Frazier as well. Like he's a brilliant marketer and businessman, but he has business lunch with Roland Frazier. Like that's definitely not his company name. He has these epic challenges that are just crushing. He's a part owner of Digital Marketer and all these other businesses. I think what that allows him to do is kind of be flexible. He can talk about whatever he wants, business, of course, but he's going to be able to kind of shine the spotlight on anything else, not a specific business. And that's what allows us, Hustle and Flowchart has always allowed us to do that and kind of even change topics on the fly if we want to, based off of feedback or our own interests.
Yeah.
So it's something to think about. But I would definitely think make some kind of destination for your podcast. And if you really know if it's going to sync up with your big brand, then that's easy. It's just a page. But other than that, if it's going to be anything kind of separate, make its own website. It's not going to hurt. I wish we did do that earlier.
Yeah, I think that answered all 3 of Tano's questions there.
Hope so.
Because he said, are you going to break the podcast off to its own site? And then his third question was, will you retire the Evergreen Profits site? Or what's the plan? So I think we kind of covered all that. Yeah, Evergreen Profits will be the sort of umbrella site. And then Hustle and Flowchart will be its own brand. All right. So Michael, I've had a podcasting setup for over 5 years, but haven't done anything because being the creator / guru stresses me out. But not having to be that really makes me excited to start. Well, I think our sort of perspective on that is like, we've never seen ourselves as gurus, right? Like we've never seen ourselves as even like experts, really.
This could be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Like I don't think we've ever seen ourselves that way. But like you said earlier, like we've always been this way, but we've only started to realize it more recently, is that we're just curators. Like we like to go and find the cool tools and say, hey, this thing is a really cool tool. You should know about it. Go get it. Here it is. This is awesome. We love it. Here's why you should love it too. Like we like making content around that kind of thing. But then we also, before we started our podcast, we already had kind of a large network. We'd been in the marketing world for almost a decade by the time we started this podcast. So we knew a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of marketers, a lot of guru type people. And we went, let's just feature them on the show. Let's just let them be the spotlight. We'll sit there and sort of steer the conversation and tell them what we want to hear them talk about. But like, they're the ones we're putting the spotlight on. We're not the guru. We're the dumbasses who are going like, we don't know your topic of interest, so explain it to us, right? Like we don't have to be the guru.
And I think that should let you really big time off the hook, Michael, because for a long time we thought we had to be the experts. Like Matt said, before we had the podcast and even some overlap with the podcast, we were publishing the Evergreen Profits letter. So that means every month we were writing something like 30 pages of unique content from our brains and our own experiences. It wasn't really curation, even though we would sometimes curate like a little section. It was like 99% of that thing was us being the experts, playing the experts. And it did stress us out. It put a lot of pressure on us to create content and always up level that content. We always wanted to do better. It kind of did pigeonhole us a little bit. We loved it for the time period, and it definitely gave a lot of value. But I think over time we realized we're like, we don't want to be the experts in the room. Like our expertise could just be being curious about these topics and kind of knowing the macro or a lot of little things. But, let's bring the experts who are like really deep into this stuff, and let's just get super freaking curious and ask the right questions. So we don't necessarily have to know the details, but we can know where to steer the conversation. And we're doing the work for our listener to then get the best value that they possibly can out of that expert, because we know generally what's important in this topic, whatever that is. And us being the curators, all we're doing is like we're navigating this conversation for the best nuggets to then give to you. Yeah. And then we just happen to publish them in all different forms so they can be easily digestible. And that's why the notes or the newsletter that was unique content from our brains at first, then turned into the action guides, still called the Evergreen Profits letter, which that's going to change to Hustle and Flowchart, some type of branding. We haven't figured that out. That'll be next in line. But now those are just curated notes. So we're not creating that content. It's actually Sue and her genius is able to extract our gibberish on the podcast and make them into something that's readable and curated. So all that's to say is hopefully that takes a little pressure off your mind.
I would even say with like PodHacker, right? The PodHacker brand.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even consider us that much of experts when it comes to that stuff. The way when we created PodHacker, the way that came to be was so many people were asking us just like, what are you doing? Like how, like you guys are putting out 2 pieces of content a week. You guys are putting out 4 YouTube videos a week. You guys are sending emails every day. You're
doing a lot.
We're making a lot of money off of sponsorships. You're doing affiliate marketing better than anybody else. Like these are actual comments we've seen. Like the affiliate marketing one, I think was one that we got most often is like, you guys are doing affiliate marketing on like a different level than other people. Right. So when we decided to make PodHacker, it wasn't us going, okay, we're going to be the experts now. When we decided to make PodHacker, we went, look, all these people are asking questions. Let's just like show them behind the scenes. Like, let's just show off like, here's how we do this. Here's how we do this. Here's how we do this. To this day, I don't even feel like that big of an expert. I just feel like I'm somebody that can open up the curtain and say, look, this is what we're doing. And that's what PodHacker is. It's just, we're documenting the systems, the templates, the processes. We're documenting everything we're doing and just going, look, here's everything we've done to make this work. And now you have access to everything we've done that's made it work. But I guess that's one of the areas where we'd be considered experts in, but still to this day, like it's not that we're not experts. We just don't approach it from that angle of we're the experts, I guess.
For sure. And Lisa, you have a good question is that you are the experts on your podcast. And that's awesome. So that basically like, is there any experts out there who podcast like us that we can model? Yes. Alpha Hippie is one of them. If you go in, this is a brand that we've been kind of consulting and partner with in some ways, but they are a podcast that there's basically one person, but you can do this with a group of people and you can see the style of interviews. There's interviews with guests And then there's solo episodes where they're talking to men specifically, and that's why you'll see the topics are definitely men focused. Alpha hippie, yeah, but it's a great podcast to model that he is the expert, and it's very focused in getting people kind of down their path to their programs and whatnot. Alex Charfin is another good example.
I was going to say James Schramko too.
He's one, yeah. So you had the Momentum podcast with Alex Charfin, where it's a solo episode. But I would say, yeah, maybe James Schramko
and George Bryant. I don't know. I could actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I could probably spend.
Well, let's talk. Yeah, James Schramko is super fast business. You can check him out. He's got a great website that you could see how he even segments his audience based off of kind of the criteria of their interest levels. So you could see how that plays in with the website side of things as well. James Schramko is a great one. We've had him on the podcast a ton.
Yeah, I'm actually curious to ask Lisa, what is your niche? Because one of our other things says we're trying to come up with a name that is interesting while incorporating our keyword, not easy. Yeah. Maybe if you throw in what their actual niche is, we might be able to help you. We'll talk about this tool, Jarvis, which if you're on our email list, you've probably seen us talk about it quite a bit lately, but you can actually leverage a tool like Jarvis to probably help you throw some ideas for names around as well.
Yeah. Throw any details you can give us, Lisa. I don't know if we'll have time to do it like a deep dive actually here on the call, but definitely any details, we'll try to answer them for you.
Yeah. Let's see. So it's always been curating versus me being the star. I'm the same human you've known. My intent has and will continue to be featuring smarty pants, fun, interesting people. Essentially, you've manifested what I envisioned, of course, in your unique personality and plenty of room for me. Awesome.
Wait, so that was Thomas. Just to clarify, yeah. I want to tell folks here.
All right, cool. So Tano's question, you have all your courses and the letter over on EGP. So will you move those or still keep that side of the EGP site going or develop some new hub for the training? So the Evergreen Profits letter is going to become Hustle and Flowchart letter, Hustle and Flowchart Insiders, something like that. We're still kind of a couple different names for how we're going to rebrand the letter, but the letter is going to kind of follow the Hustle and Flowchart brand because Hustle and Flowchart is now a YouTube channel. It's now a Facebook group. It's now an audio podcast. So it just makes sense that the sort of premium program on the back end of it is also Hustle and Flowchart branding. So that will also get rebranded as Hustle and Flowchart as well. As far as our training courses, we actually don't really promote those very much, right? That's not kind of our bread and butter. So we have PodHacker. That's our main thing that we will continue to promote, and it will be its own brand. But then our like traffic course and our affiliate course and things like that, those are out there. People can still find them and buy them, but they're not the main thing that we're out there trying to promote. So they'll probably just kind of live where they're living right now.
They're kind of more just resources. And I think that over time, you're going to see we're going to have buckets of top, like we know the categories and topics that people are really interested in our audience. So we're constantly surveying and making sure we're going to give resources around those. That's why you see like we have playbooks. There's new playbooks that we always have for lead capture. So it's basically giving away a bunch of these action guides around a specific topic. So you'll see more of that with any of the paid products that we have. They're just going to be resources that give people the ability to go a little deeper on some topic.
Yeah. All right, Michael, thanks for hanging out with us. He has to hop off.
Peace. Let's get a brew in September.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So Tano says, I was a member of your first EGP letter, and I was so sad when you guys shut it down.
Oh, man.
Then I got mad this year when I found you guys started it back up again years ago, and I didn't know. I felt left out.
So left out.
Those issues I felt missed. You guys are rocking. I'm glad I'm back up into the mix with you guys now, but I got to get a hold of all those back issues now. Yeah, our Evergreen Profits membership, all of the back issues, every single podcast episode we've ever done has an action guide available for it, and all of the back issues from even before we did the podcast. So
Sue, reach out to Tano and get him in our thing. Show him where to sign up for this bad boy.
Yeah. So all of the archives, all of the backlogs are available for everybody.
Thank you, Tano. Appreciate it. I didn't know you were hanging out with us for so many years. That's a long time, my man. We haven't scared you away by now.
Yeah.
Scared. Yeah. I like your emoji game, by the way. That's great.
And then cool. Jacob's throwing some links that we're mentioning here in the comments.
Thanks, Jacob.
And then Lisa said her topic is the theory of constraints consultants, mostly manufacturers. Okay. Maybe that's something that we can actually, if we have a little time window, we could throw it into Jarvis and see if it throws out some potential titles.
Let's do that. Yeah. We're going to keep your Q&A on screen just so it's top of mind for us as well. But yeah, let's talk about the naming of things, and we can get a little deeper. Well, yeah. I don't know any other. I was trying to think of other theory of constraints or related podcasts that I know of. I don't know any.
Well, when I think of the theory of constraints, the only thing that pops to mind immediately is The Goal, the book.
Yeah.
I think it's Elijah Goldratt or something. I don't know.
Sure. He's the only one I could think of. So maybe we can Google around him.
Yeah. So what I would probably do is like look up his book on Amazon, look at some of the keywords he's using, look at some of how the description's written, and then maybe even throw some of those words that it gives us into Jarvis and let Jarvis suggest some podcast titles. So maybe after we get through some of these other little things that we wanted to chat about, we can throw that into Jarvis and see what it spits out for us.
And then also on the manufacturer side too, there's probably some cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah. We'll pause on that, but we'll circle back, Lisa.
Yeah, the book, The Goal, is all about manufacturing specifically.
Yeah.
I'm sure Lisa knows all about it. All right, so we did that one. So another thing this is just a real quick note. One of the things we're experimenting with is we're actually testing a new advertising method where we're placing our podcast on like mainstream media sites like CNN, NBC kind of level sites. It's a brand new thing. We've already paid for the advertising, but the advertising haven't started running yet. So that's something we'll probably circle around to next month and let you know how that goes. Don't have any results.
Well, and just to give you a little bit more clarity of what this thing we're testing and why we think it could be good is, we have a bunch of friends out there always testing different podcasters. So sometimes they let us in on their experiments, and we got in on this experiment. It's brand new, hasn't even started. Just literally sent the cash over late last week. But the idea is to get featured on big media websites and essentially kind of run podcast episodes that are a little bit more mainstream, and to like a colder audience. So the idea would be to, go to a bigger audience and then go with a topic or something that will get their attention. And these ads are essentially kind of embedded right inside of content on these websites where there's actually a podcast player on that news website. So someone can click in and immediately start to listen to the podcast and also click into your show pages and whatnot. So
yeah, it's
a different thing. We've never tested anything like it, but we're giving it a shot. Yeah. And honestly, we don't know any other details than that because it's been so fresh. So
yeah, Tano's asking what platform are you using. We're actually going through an agency who's actually running it for us on our behalf. So we actually don't have all the details yet, which is why, it's just like a real quick note of something we're experimenting with. But I wanted to tell you we're experimenting with it because next month we'll probably have some results to share with you on that specific thing. And ideally more details around like how you could potentially do it yourself as well. But right now it's an agency who's actually running all the thing for us. So we paid the agency, then the agency is kind of going to their source and getting it on these sites.
From what it sounds like, Tano, if you're curious, is it's this type of advertising, from what it sounds like, is like a pool of podcasts. It's a very expensive play. I guess it's typically made for like big brands to leverage this stuff. So the idea is we got in with a pool of podcasters who were all pooling our money in to basically throw towards the ad spend, because whatever network it is, it requires pretty hefty upfront.
I think it's a minimum of a $50,000 advertising budget. So the idea being that we're going in with like 10 other podcasters, we're all splitting the budget, and then all of these podcasts are getting featured sort of, round robin style.
Yeah. And that's pretty much all the details. Yeah. Secret ninja masters. We will tell once we know more.
Yeah, we
gladly share.
We don't want to go out there and say everybody should go try this out, because it's very expensive and we have zero results yet. But next month, if we come back and go, holy crap, that just doubled our podcast downloads, you could bet we're going to tell you what we were doing.
We find a way.
We don't want people to go and take our advice and spend money on something that we have zero clue if it's going to generate one download yet. So, we're erring on the side of caution and not giving too much details and being sort of vague on purpose until we know this is something that's going to generate results for people.
Yeah. Not if we just lose our cash on it. We're not going to be reporting back to say, don't try that. Cool. Yeah. So that's a thing that's kind of different and unique. And on the downloads front, you might have seen it, but some people have just, with the changing of people getting back into work. I mean, now there's more COVID stuff happening, so who knows what's happening with listening behaviors, but things have changed obviously through the pandemic times. We have some news that we'll get into about how downloads might look like they're going down, but there's different reasons for that. There's different platforms and tech that's kind of screwing up in certain ways. So if you feel like you need to really grow you're seeing your podcast downloads kind of shake up a little bit, it's probably not you losing listeners, and we'll get into that a little later, because I know some people freak out when they see their downloads maybe drop, or they're just not growing as much. It might actually still be growing, like listenership, but maybe your downloads are effective in terms of the numbers. But that'll make more sense once we get into some of the news.
Yeah. So another thing that we're playing around with, and this is another one of those things where we'll probably have more details around it next month as we kind of get more deeper into the weeds with it. But we're actually starting to see our podcast as, and we've already kind of touched on this episode, so we don't have to go too deep, but we're starting to see our podcast as more of like a media company and not just like an individual show, right?
Yeah.
We're looking at some other like YouTubers, and we're looking at some other podcasters, and somebody mentioned Barstool Sports earlier. We're kind of looking at taking this like Barstool Sports approach, where under our sort of bigger media company, can we share the name of the media company, or is it still kind of a secret?
We can. Nothing's written down, so
yeah. So we're starting a media company.
I'll let you use your judgment, Matt.
We're starting a media company called Hustlin' Hippies, which Hustlin' Hippies is a blend between Hustle and Flowchart and this Alpha Hippie brand that we've mentioned a couple of times. So we're starting a media company, and basically underneath this media company, we would like to go and sort of acquire some podcasts and build a larger media platform.
Yeah. So the big game, and we'll just say it this way, and we've had this mindset in our heads for a while, and PodHacker has always been a part of it as well. Actually, we've always said PodHacker and everything we're doing has been like training based. I feel like that's been a lot of what we've done throughout the 10 plus years of us in business. PodHacker, it started out as it is now as a training. It's basically, well, not even just training, but it's all access. Like, hey, here's basically your business in a box that you can run with, and you have our support here. You have the community and templates to support you along the way, trusted resources. But it's not how we've always wanted to keep things. Just like with the podcast, we didn't want to just do an independent podcast thing and just do all the effort ourselves and like throw all of our resources there. We want to actually have like a collective around us to rise together. So with the rebranding of our website, that's an effort to make us more into a platform, more of a media platform where we can show off some of these cool resources and novel things that we're sharing with you and the people. But also, to your point, we want to go bigger than that. And with all these systems and the right partners, we have so many damn resources. It would be kind of crazy for us not to just tool all those things together in a smart way and partner with the right people to then basically replicate those efforts for other podcasters who are going to be in this niche that we're kind of focused on right now. And it's very rough. So details on this don't matter, but that if you're looking at the trends, and you'll really see it, there's a lot of consolidation happening right now. There's a lot of big benefits when, we're all working together in a streamlined
way. It'll become very
way.
clear when we get to the news section too.
Dude, that's like half the news. And this is where the trends, there's a lot of stuff happening, and you might not be in the know. You might see the big blips and these big acquisitions happening, but there's a lot of little smaller integrations, and there's a lot of people playing together in this space, and podcasting is changing rapidly, and there's a crap ton of money getting tossed into it.
Yeah.
And it's not even for the money for us so much. It's more like, hey, we can actually really collaborate with a lot of cool people and grow together and create something valuable that leaves a big impact, is very valuable as well. But yeah, as you said, you're going to see in the news why this is so valuable overall. And
it's something we might bring up again later, but I doubt we're going to talk about it too much in PodHacker, because I kind of doubt many people in PodHacker have aspirations to build like a media company with 100 podcasts underneath the umbrella.
Dude, but even if it's like 5 though, no, like I think the mindset's a smart one though. We don't need you don't need to sell out for like hundreds of shows or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm curious if anybody's watching this thing. Let us know inside the PodHacker group if you have any aspirations to actually start a media company with multiple podcasts, and we'll share some insights about what we're doing along the way. But I don't think it's going to be like a mass appeal kind of topic. But I think it'll still be kind of fun insights for people to see what's getting built there. And then let's see other things we've been working on. We've been going on a lot of live streams lately. That's been growing our podcast. A lot of
live streams. Yeah. So we've been doing that, and mainly on YouTube. Well, I guess it depends. Yeah. And this is a big thing of the way that we promote a lot of what we do is essentially integrating with other people. It's just like the podcasting route. We'll go on other podcasts. different guests to like a media, say a mastermind group. We were chatting at the Titans mastermind, Brian Kurtz's last week. So a bunch of copywriting kind of focused folks, but just the topics of being curators and using content strategically gets a lot of attention, brings them to our direction. Rich Sheffrin did a big live stream with him. Rich is a really good guy to follow in terms of how to apply a lot of podcasting kind of mindset, which, he learned with us and along with us, and, he's helped us tremendously. But he actually ended up starting a live stream kind of schedule on YouTube and Facebook rather than the podcasting route, at least for now. So it's pretty cool how that blend is happening. But yeah, that's kind of been our MO, is doing a lot more integrating with our content, doing more streams, hopping on lives where we can. Mm-hmm. And it's for us, the two focuses are basically Hustle and Flowchart and PodHacker are the destinations we send them to. But just think about in your space, who are the content creators, who has a schedule, maybe not a podcaster, but maybe they're a live streamer on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram that you can go check out and, start a conversation with them and start a relationship and figure out how to integrate some content with them, be a guest over there as being the expert. And, that could help you kick off some podcasts that you're starting out here or grow something you got. And yeah, check out the live stream from Rich. I mean, it was basically, it's kind of like an affiliate promotion thing happening, but the live stream itself, I thought was a really fun one. And you could see kind of how we structured that.
Yeah. All right,
what you got, Mott?
Mott.
I'm
trying to remember how to share my screen. Probably this button that says share screen.
Yeah, that would be the one, I think. Unless they changed it on us.
All right. So Google Chrome. All right. So now I'm sharing Chrome. I wanted to jump into Jarvis real quick and plug in the theory constraints consultants for manufacturers and see what it does. So this is a tool called Jarvis, and we've been using this tool a lot lately. And this was actually the sort of next thing in the agenda that we wanted to chat about here is this Jarvis tool. So Jarvis is this automated like copywriting tool, but it has so many different like templates in there as like starting points that you can use. And if you're on our list, you've seen us talk about Jarvis, and we're not trying to be overly promotional. We make next to nothing on the affiliate commissions.
That is very true.
But we just love this tool so much that we can't stop talking about it. But you can go to, let's see, what would be a good one for like
what you trying to do? Title
of her podcast. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this is where it takes a lot of experimenting. I like the titles. I mean, the YouTube one's cool because it gives you a lot of results without needing to give a lot of inputs. Try the video titles. I know it's not YouTube titles. Check it out.
Yeah, there's email subject lines too. So what is the video about? Theory constraints. See that keyword to rank for. Let's just go. This is going to give you more like titles for
YouTube videos, yeah.
For YouTube videos, but it might give some ideas. All right, what tone of voice do you want to do?
I have no clue what manufacturer's probably helpful.
Sure.
So the thing with Jarvis is, there's so many inputs. It's going to scour the internet based off of what you're putting in there, but also the tone of voice will kick out a tone of voice. You could actually put someone's name in there. So if you have someone who has been indexed by Google a lot in the last few years or so, you can actually kind of leverage their name and the way they speak.
Yeah. So I mean, like this can give you some seeds for some ideas here. I thought it actually had like a some sort of more like title thing. This wasn't like blog post titles.
Yeah. There's headlines. I mean, that's all. I feel like this. Well,
there we go. Business name or
product name. There you go. Yeah.
Theory of constraints.
So if we had more details, we probably could beef out this this description box more.
And then keywords to include Ninja. Let's just go theory of constraints. Let's see what this generates. I've actually never used the business or product name generator. Theory of
Centric Consulting. Sometimes you have to kind of work your way through the muck. TOC.
Theory of constraint.
It's almost like we probably have to feed it different stuff about the business itself.
Yeah, if we put more detail in here, it'll actually give us more.
Yeah, this is kind of not really doing it. I think okay, so I would recommend Jarvis. It's nice when you can kind of really put more details or copy around your business. Lisa, I don't know if you want to, if you have like a description of your podcast or business, we can even test it out there. I see what you're doing. So you're going to grab the description or something from this book, huh?
Yeah. So we can throw in some like information about this, because this is a book all about the theory of constraints.
Maybe some topics. I don't know if there's like a list of topics for. So this is kind of the process that we take when we're building out any kind of new content, when we don't want to use our brain to try to like brainstorm and that whole like blank page syndrome, which I'm sure you're dealing with a little bit, Lisa, on this name thing. This is just going to give us enough ideas to get us like 80% of the way there, maybe a little further. Jarvis helps us at least get the brain going a little bit, so we can then riff with maybe something they put and then modify it to our own liking.
Yeah, it doesn't really have like bullets around it, but this is, like we could go in here and grab like the table of contents and use stuff from that. Let's see.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways to use Jarvis.
Doesn't even name the titles.
That's awesome. What's the contents? Try contents really fast and see if geez.
It's just helpful. Numbers.
Oh man. All right. Well, maybe this is a bad example then. Well, the idea here is if Matt was able to find a bunch of bullets or anything specific to different topics, or Lisa, if you were to think about your own topics, you could plug those into Jarvis and it would kind of formulate a lot more combinations for you.
Yeah. I mean, here's what we've been using it for. I've been using it a lot for titles for like YouTube videos. So like I would,
let's show that really fast.
So video titles, I would come in here, and we recently interviewed a guy, Joe Sanok. The episode's not live yet, but I actually use this tool to come up with the title.
Oh, no C.
Oh yeah, there's no C. That's right. Joe Sanok, he's got this book, Thursday's the New Friday. And so he wrote Thursday's the New Friday, how to work fewer hours, make more money, and spend time doing what you want. So I actually took this subheadline here, copied it, threw it into Jarvis. What is the video about? How to work fewer hours, make more money, and spend time doing what you want. Keyword to rank for.
Working less, making more.
Work less, tone of voice. I think I probably threw in like Gary Vaynerchuk or something like that. I always like to test different people's names and see what it generates. So I would do something like this, and then it would spit out some potential YouTube titles, but then we would just use one of them as the podcast and YouTube title. I like how it made them all caps.
Yeah, what is that?
That's
Gary Vaynerchuk.
All caps. 5 ways to get out of the 9-to-5 rut.
Gary, where did I go wrong?
Fuck the law. Change your work schedule.
Hey now.
10 tips for getting more out.
Here, try remove Gary for a second. Let's do something
like an adjective instead.
Yeah. So what Matt's doing right now, these are ways that we have been coming up with podcast titles, YouTube titles. It's just a way to kind of just crank a bunch of ideas through without having to use your noggin.
Cuddle coaching. That's relevant. 7 reasons why men have it easier than women.
Some of these are.
I didn't write this, guys. The guy working 4 days a week and made 5,000 on his own.
These are really bad examples. Okay,
I always get better examples when I put somebody's name in the tone of voice.
Yeah.
I was using Frank Curd, but they were coming off very like direct response marketing. It was kind of funny.
Well, if you go back to a way, and maybe we just leave it here if we don't find another good one. But Molly Mahoney's session, the expert session we did 2 weeks ago, she went deep on Jarvis. So check out the recording in PodHacker and the membership. Look for Molly Mahoney. And she was talking about her process of essentially building a ton of content around her, just what she's doing, a bunch of social media content, all this other stuff, email content. And you'll see the tones of voices she was using. She was using like RuPaul.
Yeah.
And I forget who else, but you can go crazy.
Let's
see. What else we got in the chat here?
We will be trying to sell velocityschedulingSystem.com coaching. It's okay to have a longer podcast or use a subtitle.
Yes. Subtitles are totally cool. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Tana's put, yeah. So the TOC thing, theory of constraints, I'm assuming your audience would know them or know about theory of constraints, but so maybe figure out who your audience is. I know they're manufacturers and they should be understanding theory of constraints, at least to a bit of it, but not sure if you would want to go super close to theory of constraints or somewhere else, and Tano just used his brain. He's so much smarter than us.
Hey, we've actually titled up almost all of our last like 10 episodes using Jarvis. I don't know why it's spitting out stupid stuff right now.
We should holla at Tano instead.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So I mean, those are some ideas there. Hopefully that helps you out, Lisa. But yeah, in terms of, podcast name or use a subtitle, you can definitely have a subtitle in places like iTunes or all these other places. You can have your main title and then you have an updated subtitle afterwards that you can change as well. So that could probably help you out with getting searched and found by the right people.
Cool. All right. So let's jump into some podcast news here. So Amazon is trying to get into the podcast game.
They are in it.
Couple news articles here, I think. I got 3 news articles all related to Amazon right here. So Amazon is acquiring a podcast hosting monetization platform. So Amazon just acquired Art19, which is also a podcast host, but I think they're kind of like a full service. I think they do like a lot of stuff for you.
Is that the Gimlet of Amazon now? Kind of like how Spotify.
Yeah, but Gimlet was like more of a
production
podcast
house.
network. This is more of like a production service, I believe.
Okay.
Major podcast hosting and monetization platform. So like they're kind of like a Libsyn, but a more hands-on. Like it's a little more full service. I think they take a few more things off your plate for you than what like Libsyn might do. We've never used Art19. I don't know a whole lot about them, but Netflix just acquired them as part of them going deeper into the podcasting world. They're clearly
Amazon.
Amazon just acquired them. We'll get into Netflix.
There's
Amazon
news.
just acquired this platform, so we'll get deeper. So they're getting deeper into the podcasting space, trying to kind of do what Spotify's doing.
A little lower. I just wanted to see right there. So we've already seen this same scenario play out with Spotify. The company started out with making content-based acquisitions like Gimlet and Pearcast,
but then acquired Megaphone, which is
this
an Art19 competitor.
Yeah.
So you can see they're kind of copying what Spotify did.
And Spotify, is focused on bringing on proprietary ad serving technology. There's a lot of ad insertion software coming out too.
All this to say, crazy. Amazon is a place to kind of keep your eye on in the podcasting world because they're doing they're making some moves. They just acquired the Smartlist podcast, which is these 3 famous fellas
talking smack.
I think they bring on
60 mil. I think I said right. 80 mil. No, 80 mil.
Is that what it was? 80 mil?
Up to, I don't think it's been disclosed, but yeah, I mean that's a nice little payday for each of them. But I mean, this just shows. I think
it's always good to see, struggling young, whippersnappers,
creators,
struggling young creators
make it big,
make big money.
Hey now, I mean, we might not bank out with the 80 mil. I mean, if we do, it might be a little bit, but positioned correctly. But this just shows us the trends. I mean, now Amazon's throwing a bunch of cash at podcasting to get attention. They have the technology. They obviously have the distribution and the ability to do that. And Amazon's going to invest. They just invest big when they go in. So I'm sure this is not the only one.
Yeah.
Rivals Spotify. I mean, you got Spotify now. You have obviously Apple is trying to keep up, probably keep float. Amazon now is in the game. You'll see that Netflix is doing some stuff as well around podcasting. YouTube has always been a place and is a player, even though they might not be calling it podcasting. They definitely have a lot of services for it.
Yeah.
So this is
another article about the same thing. I think Jacob might have posted both. Jacob posted both these links, but this is another article about the same thing. So if you want to hear it from 2 different perspectives, there's 2 articles there for you. All right. So let's talk about what is this? Netflix.
Check that out really fast.
Yeah, we're talking Netflix now.
Yeah.
So Netflix, they actually went and hired the former Apple podcast exec to run their podcasting stuff. I actually don't know how this is going to play out with Netflix. Like, to me, Netflix seems like it does. Like, I don't imagine, like, when I think of Netflix, right, I'm usually sitting in front of a TV. Like, I never watch Netflix on my computer very much. I don't really watch it from my phone or tablet or anything like that. Like, I'm sitting there in front of my TV with a remote. Like, Netflix has kind of replaced what cable TV I used to do, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I can't imagine using Netflix to sit and just listen to audio podcasts. So I don't know. I'm curious to see how this actually plays out with Netflix, because I don't necessarily think it's a super smart move for their business.
Who knows, man? I mean, we had Archit Batlaw on the podcast recently, and I know he studies a lot of future trends and whatnot. And he was talking about how Netflix is getting into the merch game, which
I think
is
that's super smart.
Closer, yeah.
I think the merch game's super smart. I think the podcast game is kind of like almost too big of a diversion for it to make sense for them.
Yeah. But who knows? I mean, maybe, as if with the merchandise, maybe there's some way to integrate that, podcasting in with, I don't know, maybe there's like exclusive behind the scenes podcasts or things with the originals on Netflix. There's a lot of production that they put into things. So it could just be extending the platform and taking Netflix out of its own ecosystem and, branding them outside to just bring more awareness to their stuff.
Yeah. I'll make a bold prediction. I think they're going to experiment with podcasts, and then it's going to fade, and nobody's ever going to talk about podcasts on Netflix again. That's my bold prediction. That was actually my same prediction with Clubhouse, and I think it's going in that direction also.
I think they're gonna try to produce some podcasts here around some properties that they already have audiences around. So like Stranger Things type things, but maybe not that show, but something like that. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
How much time do we want to give it?
A year from now, nobody will be talking about podcasts on Netflix.
Okay.
Yeah, so
let's see how it goes. This is interesting. What does Tano have to say? Let's see here. I'm going to read this comment for all y'all on, I wonder if that makes video podcasting. So who's that, Tano? Or is that Jacob? Okay. So yeah, I mean, who knows? It could be a video aspect of it as well. We haven't thought about that. So, Tano, he said, this is interesting. If you look at my comment above, the long one, because it just goes to show that there is no missing the boat. If you look back at the Hollywood Reporter and Daily Variety, the two content media sources prior to the internet, you'll see back in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s that this shit was going on a daily basis. There are entertainment properties and IP deals being made, optioned, and distributed at the head spinning pace. It's now just in the public and the business and the niche world are being exposed directly to it. Totally true. And that's, I mean, we see it like we were mentioning in all these other news that we see, and just in podcasting, it's like 20 links a day. Yeah, and it's like, there's just so much happening, and you're right. Now we're just exposed to it. So we're seeing the trends a little clearer, putting predictions out there, and who knows what the hell is going to happen? But it's always been happening. Of course.
I think with Netflix, even if they do go down the video route, they're trying to change a behavior. Like certain platforms own headspace in people's minds, right? If I want to go watch like a sort of creator who's doing an interview or putting together like their own little short video, YouTube owns that space in my mind.
Yeah.
I'm not going to think of Netflix to go do that kind of stuff. Netflix is where I'll go if I want to watch like a stand-up comedy special or a movie or maybe one of their like bingeable series. But I just don't see enough user behavior changing in a way where Netflix is going to meaningfully get into the podcasting world. I just don't see it happening. I think it would be fascinating to see that big of a pivot and see something happen with Netflix. I just, if I was putting money on it today, if I was like going long or going short on this, like it was a stock, I'd be shorting that decision for them.
I want to put this out there. We actually missed this comment from Tano. It's actually the first comment as part of two that I just read. So Tano said, this is a comment to those who feel like they've missed the boat when it comes to all this topics we were talking about, acquisitions and whatnot. He said, when I started music business, there were 7 music labels or major labels, and there was 6 when I exited the industry of the business to do military combatives. 20 years later, there are only 3 major labels left. Now, there's a huge next wave in new media. There are infinite possibilities, and the numbers just keep on going up for the little guys. For instance, there's no effing way that Call Her Daddy would have made $60 million in a deal a decade ago. I agree. And this is where Matt and I have been chatting a lot about when it comes to, you're seeing a lot of consolidation, a lot of these buyouts and whatnot, but we're not hearing about the smaller ones. There's all these minor league platforms and podcast networks or record labels out there, that are just like the local ones or the industry, the industry focused ones, the niche focused labels, but Barstool Sports. I would say that's more like an indie label or something, even though it's big. but you can see they're helping to rise some of these newer podcasts, and we'll get into some of the implications specifically around Call Daddy, because there was some wild stuff that happened there.
Yeah.
And there's so much to learn now in this new space with IP, the content you're creating and how much do you actually control. But yeah, there's all these indie labels that we're probably not even thinking of, that you have so much opportunity in your own space that could raise you up and bring you so many more opportunities where you could have a nice payday or give you a lot more distribution than the effort of you doing it all yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Tano says, I'm not sure if you're right, Matt. If Netflix cuts deals for all the stars of a show to do audio video content leading up to the release of shows and after it, there could be a huge wave to niche versions of an Entertainment Tonight for each show. Don't think about the smaller movies. It could work. What would be really interesting is if they make the content free for everyone to game subscribers of their platform. I agree. It could work. I will eat my words and call myself a dumbass if I'm wrong. 1 year from now, I don't believe it's going to work. I think that space is already owned by other platforms. I think that space is already owned by YouTube in people's minds. I think people, you've got the late night shows, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, shows like that. Those all get fed over to like YouTube now, right? So like the only way I could see something like that happen is if like Netflix basically banned a lot of their creators from putting stuff on YouTube. Otherwise, I think a lot of that stuff is going to continue to roll out onto YouTube, and people will still use that as their sort of first platform to check it out. But I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about. These are all just predictions and just kind of guessing where things are going. I don't know. I think Netflix holds a certain space in people's minds, and YouTube holds a certain space in people's minds, and Netflix is trying to eat YouTube's lunch a little bit, and I don't think YouTube's going to let it happen. So
yeah, it's going to be a fight, man. There's a lot going on. So cool. Good perspectives, Tano. I appreciate it, man. Oh, yeah. And then Richie Ote is saying, I'll take that bet, Matt. All right. Interesting. So we got some action in the Facebook group, or YouTube, maybe.
Sweet.
Hey, Richie. It's happening, my friend. Another podcast vet. All right. So let's go down into this one. Bam.
Yeah, so this is also interesting. I don't really totally know the implications of this yet, but Automatic just bought Pocket Casts. And Automatic, if you're not familiar with them, they're the ones who created WordPress. They also own Tumblr. I don't believe they created Tumblr. I think they acquired Tumblr, but they founded WordPress. This is Matt Mullenweg's company, and they founded WordPress and then acquired Tumblr. So like that whole world of WordPress, Tumblr, all these other blog platforms, they just acquired Pocket Cast, which is kind of like an Overcast or like another podcast player, Podcast Addict, those kinds of things. So,
what do you think's going to happen? I mean, you're Mr. WordPress, man. You've been in this game for a long time. So what's the prediction here?
I don't totally know yet. I just think there's going to be deeper integrations between WordPress and podcasting. Like right now,
as it says literally right there.
Oh yeah. So I mean, I think that's really going to be the biggest impact. Is it's just going to be easier to host your podcasts on WordPress, and there's going to be those deeper integrations. Like right now, if you wanted to host a podcast on WordPress, you're going to go use a third-party hosting company, and then you got to, like, for a long time we were using like Blueberry PowerPress to actually have it create an RSS feed, and that RSS feed we would then put it into like iTunes and all those places. And I think what'll probably happen is just a lot of that kind of stuff will get simpler. But I don't know.
I think that's needed though, because we see it too. It's like just the online presence of a show. Most people don't know. I mean, we've already had questions today about how to present your show. And
I think there would be bigger implications with this if they had acquired a hosting company, because then I think you would be able to probably just like host your podcast on like WordPress.com or that sort of thing. But because it's a podcast player app, I'm not quite certain where they're going with this yet.
Yeah. Ooh, agreeing. Automatic needed to have a native podcast player for WordPress.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense. It's just the ease of distribution. It looks like that's what they're going. Yeah. Ease of distribution and listening. So,
yeah. I think it'll be really interesting if Automatic acquires one of the podcast hosts that's out there.
Yeah. That would be super fast.
Then I could see them going down the route of going, sign up for WordPress.com, and for, $5 more a month, you can host your podcast on WordPress.com.
So this is a different article. And I love what you were saying there. Podcast One is that's another podcast network, right? That's the one with Jordan Harbinger, I believe, right?
I believe he's on that one. I think Adam Carolla might also be on that one. I think Adam Carolla is one of the co-founders of it, if I remember correctly.
So they just acquired or debuted actually, basically a self-serve podcasting platform called Launchpad One, and this essentially seems like it's a
free podcast.
It could be a minor host, and also it's going to help you kind of grow and get distribution as well. So it's maybe their form of the minor leagues, if you think about it. Almost like you can see the podcasts on there. It's just like a bunch of, well, if it loads, there we go. It's just a bunch of shows that I think people are applying, and let's look at the features here. So hosting, analytics, it's a host, but it seems like they're kind of like integrating it in with their network. It's kind of like a combo from what my understanding is a little bit.
Yeah. Leverage unique opportunities from Podcast One, accumulate new listeners through the Podcast One and Launchpad One websites, social media, and other promotional opportunities. Get discovered by established podcast network and collaborate with Podcast One, whether you're an upstart I honestly think this is like the AAA of Podcast One. It's like their farm team,
exactly.
Right? You go and create, they get a bunch of free podcasts, and now Podcast One has a database to kind of keep an eye on. And now we're like, oh, this podcast is really good. Let's bring them up and make them part of the bigger network.
So, this goes into kind of our discussion with our business model and what we're thinking about. But what you're doing is you're training folks with your systems. You're helping them with growth. You're giving them traction. We're seeing that what show pops off, like what show takes off. You have Caller Daddy that was on Barstool Sports that I don't think they were expecting to see launch, and then here they are. They now. Mm-hmm. One gal is she's right there with Joe Rogan in the top charts, or at least was all the time, but seems like she's going to blow past. But that was because she was fueled by her Launchpad, no pun intended here. But that was her minor leagues, even though it was a pretty sweet, decent deal, we'll say.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Jordan, there he is.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like, I guess you're in the conversation if you join one of these types of things, and you have some.
One's free too. So if you're looking for a podcast host and you haven't picked one yet, you want to just dip your toes because you don't know if you want to invest a bunch of money into a different hosting company yet. Mm-hmm. I feel like places like Launchpad One and Anchor and even like Blog Talk Radio, a lot of those places might be decent places to kind of dip your toes, see if it's something you're going to stick with, and then once you know you're going to stick with it, maybe go for more of a premium hosting. This one may have all the features of a premium host. I don't know enough about it, and it's so fresh that we haven't had a chance for anybody to kind of review us and tell us about it yet. So I don't know what's going to happen with this. It may be a complete crap host, but if
it's probably decent though.
probably decent. And if you don't have a podcast published yet, that might be a good free place to try.
The next one here, or do we have any? Let's see. Do we have any questions here? Just checking. Don't think so. No, we're good. Cool. Let's continue with the news because there's some good stuff in here. Ad rip from Audio Boom. This is cool. This is basically new tech that allows you to go back in time with your previous podcast episodes, and essentially all the sponsored spots, the ad reads that you have there. Well, now you can swap them out with something different, a dynamic ad. And what this does, it gives you the ability to kind of go back into your library of content and swap out some ad spots. And basically these guys are just making it a lot easier. Ad rip.
Yeah. We haven't played with it yet. It's just something interesting. A lot of the podcast platforms let you do this already. If you're on Anchor, I know Anchor, you can already dynamically swap out ads on it. Libsyn, I believe, has the features, but I think they're on kind of more of their higher premium plans, if I remember.
So. There's all sorts.
A lot of the hosting companies are actually starting to roll this into part of their hosting package, is the ability to dynamically insert ads into existing audio files.
So with and this is just cool tech. I don't know if it's available outside of, let's say, available podcasts within, see their hosting and distribution. So that's what's kind of bummer. I wish there was something that, and this is maybe not technically possible because of the audio files and stuff.
It would have to be with your host, no matter, I think, how you do it. So, if you're on Audio Boom, I guess you have that functionality. I thought it was cooler than it really is. So we can skip past that. Podcasters are seeing lower numbers. So
this is interesting.
Yeah. So this one is basically just saying hey, you've got to do more to stand out with your podcast. This isn't really news. This should have been in the interesting section.
Finds,
But basically, I put it in the news because of the next article, right? if you are seeing lower download numbers, Apple did mention that there was a bug that was happening where anybody who's subscribed to your show, it should automatically download every single new episode if they're subscribed to it. But for a little while, Apple wasn't automatically downloading the episodes onto the subscribers' devices, right? So numbers were lower than what people were expecting, but that was just because some of the auto downloading that they were used to seeing wasn't actually happening. And I kind of partnered up this article with it in our outline, because this one is sort of arguing that, and I don't think this is a new thing. I think this is like, it's always been this way thing. You've got to do something to stand out with your podcast. Like you've got to have a reason for people to listen to your podcast over other people's podcasts.
Yeah. And another point is at the very end, and this was my big takeaway. This is a good article, by the way. I like how it's written. Is that it's not all about downloads. Where is the bottom of the article? So I thought this was interesting. So 10 years ago, a decline in downloads might have signaled the end of podcasting, but we're far from the end. And the fact that podcasting is growing, even if the downloads might not be growing, is a sign that the medium is strong, not weak. So my takeaway from this article is that downloads and audience are not the same. And that's where, going to seeing downloads go down. Yeah, it's like, the Apple thing's a piece of it. But also Spotify is a piece of it. Like they were making the point that Spotify counts downloads differently. So don't feel like just because maybe people are starting to move to Spotify for a lot of podcasts. I know I personally am. I'm listening to most of my podcasts on Spotify now. And like that's going to affect the downloads from all the shows that I'm listening to because they report them differently. But then you have places like YouTube who aren't tracking downloads. It's your audience, and you have views and subscribers and all that stuff. But essentially, the idea is this article. My big takeaway is if you just don't just put your eyes just on downloads and be like, I need more downloads because more downloads equals more people. That's not true. And if you see a dip, doesn't mean you're losing audience either. So don't get discouraged, but also know that there's platforms all around this dang world in the digital space that we collectively, you want to keep an eye on the main platforms, but look at your audience and try to figure out that number rather than just getting hung up on the download numbers, because it's probably not the most accurate.
Yeah. And also find a way to stand out.
Of course. That's always said. Yeah. Do different shit. I think be different and be.
We skipped over this one. This one's not that exciting of a news, but if you're in the digital marketing direct response world, you're probably familiar with Kajabi. Kajabi just launched podcasts. So if you host stuff on Kajabi already, you've got like a members area or something like that on Kajabi, you can now actually host your podcast straight into Kajabi. So not super relevant if you're not really using Kajabi, but if you do use Kajabi, then that's
pretty sweet. If you're using Kajabi, I like it because there's a lot of folks starting to use Kajabi a little bit more. They're freaking raising their valuations are going through the roof. And the fact that you can integrate content, courses, membership, all that stuff, and actually transact. I think there's like private and public podcasts too, so you can even make a customer only podcast or something like that. So it could be a great way to retain people in your course, sell them in your course, of course, of course. But we're just going to see more of this stuff happening with all the.
Yeah, you're just seeing all these bigger companies just kind of go, okay, podcasting's hot. Let's dip our toes in too. Let's get into the mix.
Like funnels, when are you going to be in the podcast game? Come on, Russell.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll happen.
You never know.
And then let's see, last but not least. Oh, yeah, I didn't put this one here.
I put that boy in there. So click that in. I mean, that's just. Again, this is just an example of
not a clickable link for some reason. There we go.
Interesting.
Now it is.
This is another. Everything's integrating. I mean, that's the thing. I think it's just showing the maturity of podcasting and also where that it is strong, like that article was saying. So now that Libsyn's basically giving you the option to design with Canva straight up in line somehow, and I've experienced a little bit of this with PodFest. I was like, bland, there's too many pod things. But PodFest, the event, their last event, they actually sent a link that was, hey, you could design your own Canva template for basically getting speaking position on their event. They gave a link to Canva and it was like, fill in the gaps, plug in your image here and your text here, and the template just handled it for you. It looked like it was like a professionally designed thing. Guaranteed it's something like that they're working out with podcasters at Libsyn, where it just makes it easy to kind of create the graphics. And that's exactly what it said down here is just making it simple for podcast artwork to
just I saw this pop up in the podcast news this week, and I didn't actually put it on the doc because like basically when you log into Libsyn, there's like a button that says like make your images with Canva, and then you click the button and then it just opens up Canva in another tab. So like their partnership is basically just a link between Libsyn and Canva from what I've seen. So I
could test it, I guess.
I have a feeling they're going to go more in depth with it. There's going to be more of integrations, but like they announced it and I'm like, ooh, and I logged into Libsyn and looked, and it was like there was just a button in the top that was like create an image with Canva, and you clicked on it and like a new tab would open and it would just open Canva for you. And I was like, is that hopefully really an integration?
Canva's doing cool stuff, so hopefully that it turns into something there.
Yeah, Tano says good luck doing SEO with Kajabi. The blogging sucks, so I can't see the podcast. Yeah, we don't have much experience with Kajabi. You can't speak into it. Just wanted to point it out for people that are using Kajabi that they're getting into the podcasting. Basically, we're just kind of trying to prove the point that all of these big companies are going, let's dip our toes into the podcasting world. So that's kind of the bigger point here. We don't know a ton about Kajabi. We knew the old founder, but that's about it.
Yeah, many moons ago, Mr. Jenkins. Let me actually I wanted to send a link really fast. So this next one, Pod Sites, that link that you got there, that goes to this report. So this is actually really interesting. And Pod Sites is a company we used to use for we're trying to do some retargeting for a bit. But check this out to get an idea of how advertising plays with podcasting, because they basically geared to the advertisers, and they have a lot of cool stats. And this is when you go in there. This is I can actually, Matt, I'll throw this. This is actually the PDF that people will opt in for. If you opt in, you actually do get the there's a video that goes along with this. Click the little thing right below there. Yeah. So if you go to like a couple pages down, you start to just see some of these trends. So depending on your space, this thing's pretty in depth and it breaks down all different industries. But I felt like these key takeaways were pretty interesting in that they're just finding that podcast advertising, the conversion rate, of these advertisers to wherever they're pointing to is producing much higher return on ad spend than other types of channels that you'd find in digital marketing. Of course, they have their own technology and they're gearing towards advertisers, but they do a lot of data on this specifically. So if you're interested in advertising other places, or if you have sponsorships, check this out. And there's a lot of different things that you can kind of peek at it.
It's weird because this is their 2021 report, but then if you look at their source, it's AdStage Q1 2020 benchmark report. So it's like, that's weird. How is that 2021 benchmarks if you're pulling 2020 data?
It looks like to the right. Yeah, I don't know what they're doing here. So they had some campaigns that looks like they were analyzing maybe.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Either way, like I'm sure it's pretty accurate still, but it's cool because I mean we brought sponsorships back on our show with a lot of recurring sponsors. Or one of them mainly is Ahrefs, and they've been doing great. So it's interesting, and I could see where this just puts a lot more of a personal, touch to any kind of advertising that's happening in audio and wrapping in your content in general. So peek at that. That's just some new data that came out recently.
Cool. Alrighty. So what do we got here?
Yeah, that one's a pretty cool article.
Oh yeah, this was actually one I found on Reddit. This didn't come in any of the other news sources or anything like that. But this guy, Andrew Gold, he actually shared this article on Reddit and in like the podcasting subreddit, and I actually thought it was really interesting. So we shared it in our PodHacker news email a couple weeks ago. But basically this guy is breaking down how he grew his podcast to, I don't remember how big he said he grew it to, pretty damn big.
It was towards the top. He had a pretty big claim. Yeah, it was right
yeah, 20K per week. Yeah, so he went from 4 monthly listens to 20,000 listens per week, and he breaks down how he did it by getting featured in some of the platforms. So like, so I'm trying to remember some of the examples he gave.
Well, the example was straight up, it's curation. He was applying to get featured.
That's what it was.
In places like Castbox. Well, he had a whole bunch, and we've done this too. But you can basically, he's saying you can reach out to any platform And there's always a way to get featured somehow. And obviously some platforms like Spotify and Apple are a little bit more difficult to get featured, but we do know people who have gotten featured on Apple, and they have their own criteria. They want new and novel people primarily, at least like this like a year ago or so when we heard about it. But there's so many other platforms out there. You think any kind of podcast app or website that distributes podcasts, there's going to be a way to get featured. And he's essentially suggesting if you just start reaching out to these folks, to these companies and starting conversations, figure out a way to get into that conversation and get featured.
Yeah. So
give him a reason.
So he contacted Castbox because Castbox, which is now owned by Automatic,
right.
but he contacted Castbox, and he basically noticed that they had like an editor's pick section, and he was like, I wonder how these editors are finding their picks.
Who is the editor?
So he actually reached out to the editor and said, hey, listen to my podcast, maybe it could be a good editor's pick. He somehow did that on Listen Notes also.
I didn't know that was possible, but it distributes content.
Somehow got it hit on and did something with Stitcher. And basically what he was saying throughout this thing is that with each new feature, it got easier and easier because he was able to go to Stitcher and be like, hey, look, Castbox featured me. And then he'd go to one of them and be like, hey, look, Castbox and Listen Notes featured me.
I love that. And the fact that like each feature is going to have like a unique way they feature you. So I know from our experience, there's sometimes images, but also text. So coming up with different forms of this, and I like the fact, hey, you just got a bunch of logos or whatever to fit that, and you just use Fiverr to get it done fast. It's actually the traffic stuff we're experimenting with, that kind of bigger media site. We had to prepare some images as well, and everyone has their own, assets that are required. So it's maybe it'd be smart to almost like prep some of the verbiage and things to present your show. And then you just kind of have them all modified based off of the yeses you get. But this is such a cool technique. It's something we've been always doing with content, but with podcasts specifically. Be strategic, figure out where the outlets of where people can discover you and get featured. And because most people probably are not reaching out and giving them a good reason to get featured. Shoot, offer to pay them. Like they probably won't take your money if their process is just to pick something cool, but you might as well put the offer out there.
Yeah. And then this one is interesting too. This one kind of came across our desk, and it's just kind of a fascinating read. It's
different. It's super different.
Yeah. So what these guys are doing is they're calling it generative. Podcasting. And basically every person who listens to the podcast gets kind of a different experience.
Here, explain a little bit more. I'm going to pull up the actual podcast. I don't think they link it. Well, I guess it's this website.
Isn't that the episode right there?
Yeah, I guess so. I was more looking at because they're a daily podcast, even though I was peeking at it, I'm like, they actually haven't put a podcast out in a while. But the concept is cool, and it seems like it could get there. It seems like they're kind of bootstrapping this thing from what it sounds like, where they want to have like a unique thing in the podcast depending on maybe where you live. It could be like a weather report built in there, somehow automated. The idea is to every single play on a podcast is going to kick out some kind of unique content to the listener.
Yeah. So right here he says, I do think we're trying to fix a problem that's been around since the dawn of podcasting. Podcasting is incredibly static. For the most part, listeners on one side of the world hear the exact same content as listeners on the other. And whether you download today, tomorrow, or 10 years from now, the content will remain the same. We think this makes podcasts feel, unresponsive. The one exception, this staticness, is with podcast advertising. Podcast advertisements nowadays can tailor your ads for increased relevance based on your geographic position and probably a whole load of demographic factors. Too scary to mention here for fear of summoning the ghost of Zuck. So basically, they're using this technology that makes the dynamics ads possible and sort of rotating in content based on geolocation and time of day and when you listen to it and all that kind of stuff. So interesting tech. It looks like they might have fallen off on actually producing new stuff with it, but it doesn't change the fact that this tech is something that's emerging.
Yeah. And I like the idea of it because I've never heard of it. But yeah, it sounded like they were literally a couple guys that and there was something in here. It just sounds like they were kind of bootstrapping this concept, but it is cool because I guess it's dynamic content, and I think that is the way somehow. I don't know how that fits in with podcasts perfectly, but I'd say on the ads front that would make the most sense, or maybe some notification that's sponsored, and relevant to the listener off of some criteria. This goes back to actually this article here, pod sites. because like this whole brand here, Pod Sites, Matt and I, maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, we experimented with it a bit.
We're experimenting a lot with Pod Sites, and they do, they work mainly with advertisers, and they give them a lot of data. They try to figure out ways to custom, make the audience a lot more dialed in than not, with retargeting and whatnot. Never really
feeling it's probably not super effective anymore with like the new updates. Right. So they've had to probably shift their business model a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know much about them now. They've definitely rebranded and all that since. But it's interesting because it does cater to this whole dynamic feel, and they're definitely on the cusp of some interesting stuff. But podcasting being the kind of archaic medium in the way that it's basically run, the infrastructure doesn't lend it to a lot of dynamic stuff unless you're starting to like insert things like pod sites into the workflow. Mm-hmm. And then even sometimes, like I think Libsyn, was it like they said no to pod sites,
which is funny because Libsyn is one of their examples right here, but Libsyn did actually slap pod sites and say it's one of their restricted prefixes. But they may have fixed it and everything. They're all in compliance again with Libsyn. But yeah, I mean, basically it gives us a little bit more data on who's listening to our show, right? Mm-hmm. And you used to be able to import that data into Facebook and then retarget it, but we actually never really got that to work super effectively. No. But more, the better was just kind of the better use was kind of the data we got out of it.
For sure.
It does sort of dissect more of your demographic data. Yeah, and then the only other thing that's on here, we're not really gonna like
a couple questions
watch it really, is this YouTube video that Jacob will probably throw into the comments here. But this is a really, really good breakdown of the whole Call Her Daddy situation. Mm-hmm. So Call Her Daddy was a podcast started by two girls, and it was like a sort of sex talk podcast. Mm-hmm. To be honest, I've actually never listened to the podcast. So
no, it's like real talk for women, basically. Yeah. And the two women, I think they're early 20s when they started, right?
Yeah.
And it was like 3 years in, and then that's when kind of shit hit the fan a little bit.
Yeah. So
in a good way and also a bad way.
So basically the podcast got picked up by Barstool Sports and offered these girls basically a salary and then some sort of results bonus. So the more downloads they got, the bigger the bonus they got. And after the podcast like blew up, it was this sort of viral hit. It exploded, and then the girls decided that they weren't making enough money to stay with Barstool Sports,
especially for the amount of downloads and attention.
Yeah, it's like the show got super, super big, and so they went to renegotiate their contract with Barstool Sports. They renegotiated the contract, and it was kind of, there's a lot of back and forth. But at the end of the day, they wanted to keep the IP. They wanted to keep the name Call Her Daddy, and that was where there was some big debates over. Eventually they ended up being able to keep the name Call Her Daddy,
which is crazy that they were able to get the IP, since most podcasters and content creators, Tano's probably aware of this in the music industry, they normally walk away with your IP at all.
Yeah, the record company or like the podcast network you're on typically owns the IP, the brand that's around it, but they managed to work it into the contract that they retained the IP of the company or of the podcast. The two girls, they ended up having a falling out, and one of the girls ended up leaving the podcast. And then Spotify came along and offered $60 million to the one girl that was left to come jump over onto Spotify.
It's crazy.
So Barstool Sports helped
3 years in. 3 years into their podcast.
3 years in, yeah. But so Barstool Sports helped create this podcast. There was two co-hosts when this podcast started, and then only one girl ended up walking away with 60 million after all was said and done, because they retained the IP and the other girl left, and then she got this deal with Spotify, which is just crazy.
Yeah, and Tano, you lined it out perfectly. You probably memorized this from the video or wherever. But Barstool Sports, their deal with the girls was $70,000 a year for salary, and they would get a percentage. Tano's saying 7.5% of the merch sales plus bonuses after every 100,000 downloads.
Yeah, they were making roughly $500,000 a year, but with the hit of the show, they thought they weren't making enough. So there was sort of this back and forth and a big deal. But the video, the YouTube link that Jacob just posted, is just a really phenomenal breakdown. Everything I'm saying right now is just what I learned from watching that video. These two guys, Colin and Samir, they break it down and walk you through the entire story of Call Her Daddy and the falling out with Barstool Sports and the falling out with the co-host and then Spotify acquiring it. It's just like a really well told, like in a good story arc that's engaging. And it's like a 20-minute video, but you feel like you just watched like a a documentary about this
You did.
this podcast. So it's really, really good stuff. And that was the last thing I wanted to share because I found it fascinating.
And big takeaway there, or a lot of different takeaways, but I think that's relevant to, I mean, you heard about this now, Amazon acquiring, oh, not that one, acquiring these guys, their podcast. But, we've heard Joe Rogan, of course, on Spotify, Armchair Expert. But then there's a lot of little smaller podcasts that we don't hear about. But think about the IP thing, not a lot of folks are aware of kind of the implications of when you join some of these networks, the implications of what happens to your content afterwards when maybe you want to do something outside of the network in the future. Like, what does the deal look like? Like what Tano said is super important. And, I'm sure you got a ton of experience in this as well, Tano, but podcasting, it's a similar space right now. So, just be strategic with if you choose to join a network or do something like that. We've been approached many times by smaller networks, some of them larger as well, but just future pace a little bit and make sure whoever you join is going to help support you in your goals.
Yeah. Let's see here. So what did Tano say? The chick who ended up leaving, her boyfriend was an HBO exec and said that it was undervalued. The chick who stayed agreed to the 500K base plus a raise. And keeping the IP. The reason it happened is because Barstool was losing millions of dollars with them being off the air for 6 weeks. Yeah,
that bit him in the ass for sure.
Definitely, everybody should watch that YouTube video because it breaks it all down really well. And Tano's breaking it down just as good. But it's a good it's a good story.
It is. Well, it's a big lesson and it hurts for one of them. And you're right. Yeah, it was like an HBO exec, which, let's be honest, he's probably making buku bucks too, But yeah, he knows he was probably right that they're undervalued, but also this is a totally different space. And who would have known 60 mil was coming from Spotify? But they were number 2, the second podcast behind Joe Rogan, I believe it was, for at least a long time. So those of y'all who have not heard of Call Her Daddy, a lot of people have. So there was a lot of attention, and that's why they were able to ramp it up so fast.
Yeah.
The main focus and this is Tano again, the main focus to understand is that even with the Spotify deal, Barstool keeps the rights to the merch, which was the main focus of their income, and will grow with Spotify ramping up. Yeah. That's a good distinction. I totally forgot about that. Is they do retain, the IP to the merch.
Barstool Sports didn't totally get screwed. No. They just basically got Spotify's marketing machine to help grow their
kick
merch.
them more attention to their merch.
But basically, the big loser here was the co-host that left because of her HBO exec boyfriend.
She didn't think it was enough money. I mean, 500K yes, if you're looking at the attention, but that hurts, man. That hurts.
Cool. Well, we got 2 more questions here and just a couple minutes left. So,
Barstool did it on purpose. Yeah, no, they ain't no dummies, man.
So Susan says, do you recommend Google ads when you're just starting your podcast or when you start monetizing? To be honest, I don't really highly recommend Google ads for your podcast, especially not early on. We kind of use Google ads for our podcast in a roundabout way.
Yeah, it's a growth strategy, but it's not something to really kick from the beginning.
Yeah, I would wait until you've got some traction. The way we're using Google ads right now is we're actually bidding for people who search top business podcasts, top marketing podcasts, top entrepreneur podcasts, things like that. And then we have a blog post. It's like a breakdown of our top 10 business, marketing, entrepreneur podcasts. We just happen to be one of those items in the list. And that sort of workaround, kind of roundabout way to get people clicking over to our content has actually worked well for us. But we never actually advertise with a Google ad straight to a podcast or a podcast episode.
Yeah.
So we do this roundabout way. It's sort of, I wouldn't do it unless you're making money off your podcast already, because I don't think it's a super effective thing. It's just something that kind of keeps us in the loop when people do searches like that.
Yeah. Good question, though. And I like how you're thinking out of the box there. So you also asked, Susan, that you noticed that Tom's podcast website locks access unless you subscribe first. Is this a technique recommended when you start out to keep the community filled and engaged with members? Tom's podcast.
I'm not quite sure what the Tom's podcast.
That was one of these.
Something we referenced in the notes.
It was something we referenced. Hold on one sec. I'm just trying to get back to.
It's probably this Tom Webster one up there.
Oh yeah, good call. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So
let's see, where was it? Subscribe. So are you talking down here? Oh, well, that's just that actually is weird. Member, Not sure what this is. We don't know his model.
Yeah, we're not super familiar with the model. We just read the content. And I don't remember ever having to opt in or anything to read the content. I just clicked the link and the content works. So if you're seeing something other than what we're seeing, then I'm actually not familiar with what he's doing there.
Well, let me see. You said podcast website. So let me see what we got here. This is interesting. Yeah. I mean, it looks like he's publishing it with listen notes as well.
Yeah,
if
that's
I'm not
mistaken.
I have not really seen
I didn't even
that.
know you can embed a listen notes player. That's kind of cool.
Oh yeah, it was when I clicked on the home button. Okay, I'm just kind of curious now to see what this is.
Oh, so I guess if you come straight in through the home thing, you could subscribe, but he's got the read past issues, so you could skip it if you want. I mean, I don't know.
I don't think it's a bad idea.
I don't think it's a bad idea either.
You just give them a good reason why they would want to subscribe. I mean, this is probably not the most inviting way to greet someone for the first time.
They're following the Substack model. If you look at what you're doing, he's basically doing what they do over on Substack, which is like a free blogging platform where you can collect emails before they opt in, but then it also lets you bypass the opt-in and read the content anyway. But then there's probably some premium content where only subscribers see this content.
Yeah.
And I think it's a cool model. It's not the model we chose to go down, but I mean, it seems to be working for a lot of people.
And it's always helps when, you're welcome, Suzanne. I know, you didn't see the past issues, but this is cool. Just shows you it's another model, but hey, the fact that they're collecting email addresses is probably the key thing. So definitely, if you're not doing that in some form mechanism, go start collecting email addresses. You will not regret it. All right, show the money shot, guys. Can't see.
Oh yeah, I'm not showing our screen anymore. We went to tomwebster.media and it was showing.
Our bad. Sorry, Tano.
Yeah, I forgot I turned off screen sharing. So basically, this is what you see when you go to tomwebster.media. You land on this site. It asks you to subscribe. You can actually click here and bypass it if you want. And then this is where all their content is listed.
And that was that article we were showing earlier.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because people can get access, but I think a lot of people probably land on the site and go, I got to get my email address to get access. And they probably don't even realize that they can read the past issues. So they probably actually collect a lot of emails from it.
Yeah. Or people just moving away too. I think that's everything. Wait, was there another Q&A? No. Cool.
That's it.
Right on. We covered a lot. That was a lot of news. I mean, check out this thing. These docs are. We should probably give these docs away. Maybe make them look a little nicer sometimes. I don't know. Little resources. Any questions y'all have after listening to that? My brain's spinning on all these acquisitions and what's. I mean, it's the model. I like what you said, Tano. Is back in the day. I mean, this stuff's been happening for a long time. There's always a lot of movement. And I think our job for you guys is always to give you the best of the best, but also open up your mind to some other possibilities of what you can do with podcasts. And depending on whatever, the intention is for having a podcast in the first place, maybe start to use some of these as influences and figure out where the puck is going.
Yes.
And make sure you're positioned correctly to do so, because that's what lights us up. Yes. So it makes it fascinating. So,
very cool. Well, if you have any more questions or you want to discuss any more of what we talked about today, go over to podhacker.com/group. That's where the PodHacker members group is. If you're not a PodHacker member yet, go to podhacker.com. You can join us on these live office hours calls. You can join us on our expert session. You'll get access to all of the templates, all of the swipe files, all of the done for you assets that we've created for you, including all of our sort of tactical tutorials. All of that's over at podhacker.com. And again, next month, August 10th, we've got Lisa Beyer, the PR expert, joining us for only members. This one won't be streamed to YouTube or anything. And we've got some cool new training from Luis Diaz in there, all about how to get more referrals and how to turn your referrals into affiliates. That should be probably in there by the end of the day today. So that's podhacker.com to sign up. And if you want to get our weekly PodHacker newsletter, go to podhacker.com/news.
News.
I think that's all of the calls to action that I need to make.
I think you nailed all the call to actions. And Tano, I want to show you a little something based off of your last comment, and I appreciate you always for your efforts to improve our podcast. But we are actively looking to, I don't know, and got to give love to Jacob Gooden on the podcast here. He runs in the room. He runs our content stuff. He was telling us about these arms that Elgato just put out, these low profile arms. So we're actually wanting to get these. I think they're still sold out. At least they were last week. Yep, still sold out. But these bad boys, this is what we're gonna get for the office here. So they're kind of low profile arms, so you're not hearing that sound all the time.
Yeah.
There you go, Tana. Just wanted to say we're working on it. All right.
Already.
Take a screenshot of that if you don't mind to his phone number. Tana's just giving away his digits again.
I got his phone number.
Oh, you do.
Well, it's saved. Everything that goes in the chat gets saved to a text file. So
Tana, all right. We got to hit you up, man. I appreciate you.
All righty, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. If you're not a PodHacker member, go to podhacker.com and sign up for the newsletter, podhacker.com/news. And if you are a PodHacker member, go to the group, podhacker.com/group. All right. Bye.